What if I told you that every single night when you close your eyes and surrender to sleep, you're actually entering the most powerful prosperity portal that exists in this entire universe? That while your physical body rests and restores itself, your subconscious mind transforms into what Florence Scovel Shinn called a divine receiving station, perfectly aligned with infinite abundance, completely open to miraculous provision, and utterly receptive to wealth frequencies that your conscious mind blocks during waking hours. But before we journey together into this sacred understanding, please take a moment to hit the like button and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed to see our global community gathering here from every continent, united by this ancient wisdom that transcends all boundaries. Tonight, something extraordinary is unfolding. As you prepare for sleep, as your body begins to relax and your breathing deepens, you're not simply ending another ordinary day and drifting off into unconsciousness. You're stepping across the threshold into what Florence Scovel Shinn described as the secret place of the Most High, a sacred dimension where the gates of divine supply swing wide open, where unlimited wealth flows without any resistance or obstruction, and where your deepest desires for prosperity are not only heard but instantly fulfilled in the invisible realm before manifesting in your physical reality. Has this ever happened to you? You've gone to bed worried sick about money, your mind racing with anxiety about overdue bills, stressed about how you're going to make ends meet this month, tossing and turning with fear about your financial future, only to wake up the next morning with an inexplicable sense of peace washing over you. Or perhaps discovering an unexpected solution waiting in your email inbox, or receiving a phone call about an opportunity you never saw coming. This isn't random luck or meaningless coincidence. This is spiritual law operating at the highest level. This is what happens when your conscious mind, with all its doubts and limitations and learned scarcity patterns, finally quiets down and gets out of the way, allowing your subconscious mind to do what it was designed to do, which is connect directly with the infinite intelligence that governs all abundance in the universe. You see, most people in this world approach sleep as nothing more than a biological necessity, a time when the body repairs cells and consolidates memories, something you have to do to avoid feeling exhausted the next day. But what you're about to discover tonight will completely transform your understanding of what sleep actually is and what it's truly for. Sleep is your most sacred appointment with wealth itself, your nightly meeting with divine abundance, your regular consultation with the source of all supply, not the kind of wealth that requires grinding effort and endless struggle, not abundance that comes through sacrifice and suffering, but the effortless prosperity that flows naturally when you align yourself with spiritual law and open yourself to receive what has already been prepared for you. Tonight, we're going to explore exactly how sleep becomes this supernatural wealth portal, why your subconscious mind during sleep hours is exponentially more powerful for manifestation than your conscious mind during waking hours, and most importantly, the specific practices you can implement starting tonight to activate what Florence Scovel Shinn called the law of opulence while you sleep. By the time you drift off tonight, you'll understand how to use those precious hours of unconsciousness not just for physical rest, but as dedicated time for rewiring your prosperity consciousness, dissolving financial blocks, and literally magnetizing money to yourself through the creative power of your sleeping mind. But first, let me share something with you that might completely shift your perspective on why you've been struggling financially despite working so hard and trying so many different approaches. The reason most people never experience true abundance, the reason they stay trapped in cycles of financial stress and limitation, no matter how much effort they put in, has nothing to do with their work ethic, their education level, their family background, or the economic conditions around them. The real block to prosperity exists in a place most people never look, a place they don't even know exists. That place is the subconscious mind, specifically the programming that runs automatically beneath your conscious awareness, directing your financial reality without you even knowing it's happening. Your subconscious mind is like a massive hard drive that's been programmed since childhood with beliefs, attitudes, fears, and patterns around money. Every message you received from your parents about finances, every experience you had with lack or abundance growing up, every cultural conditioning about wealth being difficult or requiring sacrifice, every religious teaching about money being somehow spiritual or dangerous, all of this created a complex web of subconscious programming that now runs automatically beneath your conscious thoughts, creating your financial reality, whether you're aware of it or not. Here's the profound truth that Florence Scovel Shinn understood over a century ago. Your conscious mind, the part of you that thinks and plans and decides and reasons during waking hours, only controls about 10% of your behavior and your results. The other 90% is controlled by your subconscious mind, operating beneath your awareness, running programs that were installed long ago, creating circumstances that match those deeply embedded beliefs rather than your conscious desires and affirmations. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't create lasting financial transformation. This is why affirmations spoken during the day often feel empty and produce minimal results. This is why visualizing abundance while you're wide awake requires tremendous effort and still seems to produce inconsistent outcomes. Because your conscious mind, no matter how positive you try to be, is constantly being overridden by subconscious programming that's running in the background, creating scarcity experiences that match the scarcity beliefs embedded deep in your unconscious. But here's where everything changes. Here's where the real magic begins. Here's why sleep is the ultimate prosperity tool that you've been overlooking. During sleep, your conscious mind, with all its analytical reasoning and learned limitations, completely shuts down. The critical faculty that normally censors and filters everything, that says, "That's impossible," or "That won't work for me," or "I don't deserve that," goes completely offline. And in that state of conscious shutdown, your subconscious mind becomes completely open, utterly receptive, perfectly moldable, ready to accept new programming without any resistance or argument. Think about it like this. During your waking hours, your conscious mind is like a guard standing at the door of your subconscious, evaluating every new thought or belief, deciding whether to let it in based on whether it matches existing programming. If you try to affirm abundance while you're wide awake, but you have deep subconscious beliefs in scarcity, that conscious guard says, "Rejected. That doesn't match what we believe here." And the abundance affirmation never makes it into your subconscious, where the real creative power exists. But during sleep, that guard goes home for the night. The door to your subconscious stands wide open, and anything you plant in that fertile soil of unconscious mind takes root immediately without any resistance or filtering or rejection. This is exactly why Florence Scovel Shinn taught her students to work with their consciousness during the transition into sleep, that precious window of time when you're no longer fully awake, but not yet deeply unconscious. She called this the hypnagogic state, that dreamy in-between space where your subconscious is maximally receptive to new programming. And she taught specific techniques for using this state to implant prosperity consciousness so deeply into the subconscious that it begins creating wealth automatically, effortlessly, naturally, without any force or struggle during waking hours. But before we get into those specific techniques, I want you to understand something crucial about how your subconscious mind works during sleep, because this understanding will make everything else we discuss far more powerful. Your subconscious mind doesn't sleep when your body sleeps. In fact, it becomes hyperactive during sleep hours. processing the day's experiences, consolidating memories, working through problems, and most importantly, for our purposes, creating your future reality based on the dominant thoughts and beliefs it's holding. Scientists have discovered that the brain waves during certain stages of sleep, particularly the theta and delta wave states, are the same brainwave frequencies present during deep meditation, hypnosis, and peak creative states. These are the frequencies where manifestation happens most powerfully, where consciousness has direct access to what quantum physicists call the field of infinite possibilities, where thoughts become things at accelerated rates, where intention collapses into form almost instantaneously. So every single night, whether you realize it or not, whether you're using it consciously or not, you're spending several hours in the most powerful manifestation state that exists. Your brain is literally in the same frequency as master meditators who spend years training to reach these states. You're accessing the same consciousness portal that mystics and saints throughout history have sought through elaborate practices and disciplines. You're entering the field of pure creative potential, where miracles are not just possible, but natural. The only question is, what are you creating during those powerful hours? Are you using that immense creative power intentionally to manifest abundance? Or are you allowing old scarcity programming to run unconsciously, recreating lack and limitation automatically? Most people, and this might have been you until tonight, go to bed with their minds full of worry, fear, stress about money, replaying financial problems, imagining worst-case scenarios, essentially spending several hours in the most powerful manifestation state, programming their subconscious for more lack and limitation. Then they wake up and wonder why their financial situation never improves, despite their hard work during the day. They're literally undoing any progress they make while awake by spending their sleep hours, the most powerful creative hours available, reinforcing poverty consciousness at the deepest levels. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught a radically different approach. She taught her students to treat the transition into sleep as sacred ritual, a holy practice of consciously directing the subconscious mind toward prosperity before releasing into sleep. She taught specific words to speak, specific images to hold, specific feelings to cultivate during that precious hypnagogic window, essentially hijacking the most powerful manifestation time available and using it deliberately to rewire prosperity consciousness at levels the conscious mind can never reach. And the results her students experienced were nothing short of miraculous. People who had struggled financially for decades suddenly experiencing breakthrough after breakthrough, debts dissolving in impossible ways, money appearing from unexpected sources, opportunities manifesting that couldn't be explained by logic or effort, all because they learned to use their sleep hours as dedicated prosperity programming time instead of wasting those powerful creative hours on unconscious fear and worry. Now, let me share with you one of the most powerful prosperity teachings Florence Scovel Shinn ever gave about working with consciousness during sleep. And this single practice alone has the potential to completely transform your financial reality if you implement it faithfully. She taught that in the moments before sleep, you should speak out loud a specific decree that activates the law of opulence in your subconscious mind while you sleep. The exact words matter because words are not just communication. They're creative forces that set spiritual laws in motion, especially when spoken during that hypnagogic window when the subconscious is maximally receptive. Here is the prosperity decree Florence Scovel Shinn taught for bedtime practice. Listen carefully to these words, and tonight, as you prepare for sleep, I want you to speak them out loud, slowly, with feeling and conviction, allowing each word to sink deep into your receptive subconscious. As I sleep tonight, divine abundance flows through my consciousness like a river of gold. Every cell of my being is saturated with prosperity. My subconscious mind is now aligned with infinite supply. I wake tomorrow morning magnetized to money, attracting wealth effortlessly, open to receive abundance from expected and unexpected sources. Infinite intelligence is working through my sleeping mind right now, dissolving every block to prosperity, erasing every limiting belief, installing perfect abundance consciousness that creates wealth automatically in my life. The power of speaking this decree right before sleep cannot be overstated. You're essentially giving your subconscious mind, which is about to enter several hours of the most powerful creative state possible, direct instructions about what to create during the night. You're not hoping or wishing. You're commanding, decreeing, activating spiritual law through the authority of your spoken word at the exact moment when your subconscious is most open to receiving new programming. But it's not enough to just speak the words mechanically without engaging your feeling and imagination. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that words combined with feeling and mental imagery create the strongest subconscious imprint. So as you speak this bedtime prosperity decree, I want you to actually imagine abundance flowing through your sleeping mind like a river of golden light. Feel the sensation of prosperity saturating every cell. See yourself waking up tomorrow as a money magnet. Hold the image of yourself receiving abundance from sources you can't even predict right now. Make it real in your imagination and feeling, because your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and actual physical experience. Now, let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates the incredible power of this practice. There was a woman who came to Florence Scovel Shinn many years ago in a state of complete financial desperation. She was a single mother with 3 children, working 2 jobs, but still unable to pay rent, facing eviction, with no family to help and no obvious solutions available. She was so stressed about money that she wasn't sleeping at night, lying awake for hours, gripped by anxiety, imagining all the terrible things that might happen, essentially spending her most powerful creative hours programming her subconscious for disaster. Florence taught her this bedtime prosperity decree and instructed her to speak it every single night before sleep without fail, no matter how much her circumstances seemed to contradict the words she was speaking. The woman was skeptical at first because her situation was so dire that positive words felt like denial of reality, but she was desperate enough to try anything, so she committed to the practice. Every night before bed, even through tears of fear and worry, she would speak the decree out loud, imagining abundance flowing through her consciousness while she slept, declaring that her subconscious was being aligned with infinite supply. For the first week, nothing visible changed. Her circumstances remained the same. Bills were still unpaid. Eviction was still looming. But something was shifting beneath the surface that she couldn't see yet. The practice of speaking prosperity before sleep was beginning to rewire her subconscious programming. The hours she spent sleeping in abundance consciousness rather than poverty consciousness were starting to shift her energetic frequency. The subconscious instructions she was giving every night were beginning to create new neural pathways, new beliefs, new expectations. Then in the second week, small things started shifting. A neighbor unexpectedly offered to watch her children for free so she could pick up extra hours at work. She found $20 in an old coat pocket. A medical bill she'd been worried about was mysteriously reduced due to an accounting error. These weren't huge windfalls, but they were evidence that something was changing, that her consciousness was beginning to attract different circumstances than before. By the third week, larger shifts were happening. One of her employers offered her a promotion she hadn't even applied for. An old friend she hadn't heard from in years called and mentioned a job opening at her company that paid significantly more than both jobs the woman was currently working combined. A relative she barely knew sent an unexpected gift of $500 in the mail with a note saying they'd felt prompted to help. Within 6 weeks of faithful practice of this bedtime prosperity decree, her entire financial situation had completely transformed. She had the new, higher-paying job. She'd caught up on all her overdue rent. She had money in savings for the first time in years. The eviction notice had been withdrawn, and most importantly, the chronic anxiety and fear around money that had been controlling her life had dissolved, replaced by a deep inner knowing that she was divinely supplied and would always be taken care of. When she came back to Florence Scovel Shinn and shared all these miracles, Florence simply smiled and said, "This is what happens when you stop using your sleep hours to create poverty and start using them to create prosperity. You didn't change your external circumstances through effort. You changed your internal consciousness through sacred sleep practice, and your external circumstances had no choice but to reorganize themselves to match your new consciousness. This is the power available to you starting tonight. You have been wasting the most creative hours of your existence. Those precious sleep hours when your subconscious is in peak manifestation state, by either allowing unconscious fear programming to run automatically or by simply not using those hours intentionally at all. But from tonight forward, everything changes. From tonight forward, you're going to treat your sleep time as sacred prosperity practice. From tonight forward, those hours of unconscious creativity are going to be directed deliberately toward abundance rather than wasted on worry. Now let me share with you another crucial element of using sleep for wealth manifestation that Florence Scovel Shinn taught, and this practice works in beautiful combination with the bedtime decree. She taught that you should create what she called a prosperity lullaby, a short, repetitive phrase that you say over and over as you're falling asleep, allowing it to be the last thought impressed on your subconscious before you slip into unconsciousness. This final impression is incredibly powerful because it's what your subconscious works with during the first and deepest stages of sleep. The prosperity lullaby Florence Scovel Shinn recommended was simple but profoundly effective. As you're lying in bed after speaking your longer prosperity decree, as you feel yourself beginning to drift towards sleep, simply repeat silently in your mind, over and over, "I am rich, I am rich, I am rich." Just those 3 words, repeated rhythmically like a mantra, like a lullaby you're singing to your own subconscious, the last conscious thought before sleep takes over. The power of this practice is that you're literally programming your subconscious with an identity statement rather than a hopeful wish. You're not saying, "I hope to be rich someday," or "I'm trying to become wealthy," or "I want more money." You're declaring present tense identity. I am rich. And because you're declaring this at the exact moment of transition into sleep, when the subconscious is most receptive and the conscious mind's critical faculty is offline, this identity statement bypasses all resistance and plants itself directly into your unconscious as accepted fact. Your subconscious mind, once it accepts something as fact, immediately begins working to make your external reality match that internal identity. It starts attracting opportunities, ideas, people, and circumstances that align with the identity of being rich. It begins dissolving blocks and limitations that contradict wealth consciousness. It rewires your automatic behaviors and reactions to match someone who is abundant rather than someone who is lacking. All of this happens automatically, beneath conscious awareness, as the natural result of that identity statement you planted right before sleep. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you practice both elements together starting tonight. First, speak the full bedtime prosperity decree out loud with feeling and imagination, giving your subconscious clear instructions about creating abundance while you sleep. Then, as you actually begin drifting off, repeat the simple prosperity lullaby silently. I am rich, I am rich, I am rich, making that your final conscious thought before sleep. These 2 practices working together create a powerful 1-2 punch that begins rewiring prosperity consciousness at the deepest possible levels. Now, some of you might be thinking, but isn't this lying to myself? I'm not actually rich right now. Won't my subconscious reject this as false? This is a crucial misunderstanding that I need to clear up because it's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people trapped in poverty. When you declare, "I am rich," you're not making a statement about your current bank account balance. You're making a statement about your spiritual identity and your consciousness. And at the spiritual level, you absolutely are rich because you're connected to infinite supply, you're heir to divine abundance, you're one with the source of all wealth in the universe. The poverty you're experiencing in physical form is temporary and changeable. It's merely a reflection of old consciousness, old programming, old beliefs. But the wealth you are in spirit is eternal and unchangeable. When you declare, "I am rich," you're aligning your conscious awareness with your true spiritual nature rather than with temporary physical circumstances. You're speaking from truth rather than from appearances. And your subconscious, which operates on the spiritual level more than the physical level, recognizes this truth and begins creating physical circumstances to match it. Florence Scovel Shinn used to say, "You must claim your good before you see your good." She meant that you have to establish wealth consciousness before wealth manifests. You have to be rich in consciousness before you can be rich in circumstance. The inner must change before the outer can change. And the fastest way to change the inner is to work with your consciousness during sleep, when you have direct access to the subconscious without the interference of the critical conscious mind. Let me share another story that demonstrates this principle powerfully. There was a man who attended one of Florence Scovel Shinn's lectures during the Great Depression, when millions of people had lost everything and genuine poverty was widespread. This man had been wealthy before the crash, but had lost his entire fortune. His business failed, his savings evaporated. He went from prosperity to barely surviving seemingly overnight. And the psychological impact was devastating. He was consumed by bitterness, anger, fear, constantly replaying what he'd lost. Unable to sleep at night because of anxiety about his financial future. Florence taught him these sleep practices, the bedtime decree and the prosperity lullaby. But he resisted at first because he felt like declaring, "I am rich," when he was nearly homeless was ridiculous, perhaps even insulting to people suffering real poverty. But Florence explained to him that his current poverty was not more real than his spiritual wealth. His empty bank account was a temporary circumstance that could change, but his connection to infinite supply was an eternal spiritual fact. If he wanted to restore his fortune, he had to restore his prosperity consciousness first, and the fastest way to do that was through dedicated sleep practice. Finally, he agreed to try it, mainly because he was too exhausted from sleepless nights to keep resisting. That very night, he spoke the prosperity decree before bed. Then as he drifted off, he repeated, "I am rich," over and over, until sleep took him. For the first time in months, he slept deeply and peacefully through the entire night. Something about the practice had calmed his anxious mind and allowed genuine rest. He continued the practice every single night without fail. After about 2 weeks, he noticed his entire mental and emotional state had shifted. He no longer felt desperate and hopeless. Ideas were coming to him about how to rebuild. He was seeing opportunities he'd been blind to before. His energy had returned. He felt like himself again for the first time since losing his fortune. Within 3 months of consistent sleep practice, he had started a new business venture that immediately began succeeding. Within 6 months, he had recovered more than half of what he'd lost. Within 18 months, he was wealthier than he'd been before the depression hit. And he credited the transformation entirely to those simple practices of working with his consciousness during sleep. Practices that had rewired his prosperity programming at such deep levels that abundance could flow to him again, naturally. This is available to you. The same spiritual laws that worked for him work for everyone, because law is impersonal and universal. It doesn't matter if you've been poor your whole life or if you recently lost wealth you once had. It doesn't matter if you're starting from absolute zero or if you have some foundation to build on. The laws of consciousness work the same for everyone. And sleep is the great equalizer, the time when anyone can access the most powerful manifestation states regardless of their waking circumstances. If what you're discovering tonight about sleep as your prosperity portal resonates with something deep inside you, if you feel that inner recognition that says, yes, this is the wisdom I've been seeking, I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel. This is where we explore the profound spiritual laws of abundance that Florence Scovel Shinn taught. The practical mysticism that most people never encounter, but that has the power to completely transform your financial reality. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these teachings that could change everything for you. Now, I want to take you deeper into understanding exactly what's happening in your brain and consciousness during sleep that makes it such a powerful prosperity tool. Because when you understand the science and spirituality working together, your faith in these practices becomes unshakable. Modern neuroscience has discovered something extraordinary that Florence Scovel Shinn knew intuitively over a century ago. During sleep, particularly during REM sleep and deep delta wave states, your brain reorganizes itself, creates new neural pathways, consolidates learning, and essentially rewrites the operating system of your mind. What scientists call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself by forming new connections between neurons, happens most dramatically during sleep. Every night while you're unconscious, your brain is literally rebuilding itself, strengthening some neural pathways while pruning away others based on what you've been thinking about, feeling, and focusing on. This is why people often wake up with solutions to problems they were stuck on the day before. The sleeping brain was working on the problem unconsciously, making new connections, seeing new possibilities that the conscious mind couldn't access. But here's what most people don't realize, and what makes sleep prosperity practice so incredibly powerful. Your brain doesn't distinguish between real experiences and vividly imagined experiences when it's rewiring itself during sleep. If you fall asleep imagining abundance, speaking prosperity, holding wealth consciousness in your awareness as you drift off, your sleeping brain treats that as real experience and builds neural pathways accordingly. It creates the same brain structures that would form if you were actually experiencing prosperity in physical reality. This is why athletes visualize perfect performance before competition. This is why musicians imagine flawless execution before concerts. This is why successful people often report dreaming about their goals before achieving them. They're using the brain's inability to distinguish between imagination and reality during sleep states to pre-build the neural architecture of success. And you can do exactly the same thing with wealth consciousness. You can use your sleep hours to build prosperity brain structures that then automatically create prosperity behaviors and attract prosperity circumstances during your waking hours. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this principle long before neuroscience could explain it. She taught that imagination is the creative workshop of the mind, especially during sleep when imagination operates without the censorship of the conscious mind. She taught that what you imagine consistently before sleep becomes impressed on the subconscious so deeply that it manifests in physical form as surely as a seed planted in good soil becomes a tree. She didn't know about neuroplasticity or neural pathways, but she knew through spiritual understanding and direct experience that consciousness reshapes itself during sleep based on what you feed it before sleeping. This is why I keep emphasizing the importance of being intentional about your consciousness during that transition into sleep. Most people stumble into bed exhausted, minds full of the day's problems and worries, and fall asleep with anxiety and limitation as the last impressions on their subconscious. Then they spend 8 hours in deep neuroplastic states, essentially hardwiring poverty consciousness more deeply into their brains. No wonder they wake up and recreate the same financial struggles day after day. They're literally building stronger lack pathways in their brains every single night. But when you implement the practices I'm teaching you tonight, when you speak prosperity decrees before bed, when you fall asleep repeating wealth affirmations, when you use those precious transition moments to impress abundance on your receptive subconscious, everything flips. Now, you're spending 8 hours building prosperity neural pathways. You're using your brain's natural neuroplastic ability to rewire yourself for wealth rather than for lack. You're harnessing the most powerful mind-reshaping time available to create the consciousness that automatically attracts money. Let me share with you another practice that Florence Scovel Shinn taught specifically for sleep prosperity work. And this one is particularly powerful for people who struggle with anxiety and fear around money. She taught something she called the gratitude sleep practice. Here's how it works. In addition to speaking your prosperity decree and repeating your wealth lullaby, she recommended spending the last few minutes before sleep in active gratitude for money and abundance, even if your current circumstances seem to contradict having anything to be grateful for. This might sound difficult at first, especially if you're in financial struggle. How can you be grateful for abundance when your bank account is empty? But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that gratitude doesn't wait for circumstances to be perfect. Gratitude is what creates perfect circumstances. When you're grateful for money before you see money, you're activating the spiritual law of attraction at its highest level. You're matching the frequency of abundance, which is essentially the feeling of gratitude and appreciation. And your subconscious mind, feeling genuine gratitude as you fall asleep, begins creating circumstances that match that feeling. So here's the specific practice. As you're lying in bed, after speaking your prosperity decree, after beginning to repeat your wealth lullaby, pause for a moment and think of specific things you're grateful for related to money and abundance. Maybe you're grateful that you have a roof over your head tonight. Maybe you're grateful for the job you have, even if it doesn't pay enough yet. Maybe you're grateful for the $20 in your wallet. Maybe you're grateful for the ability to earn money at all. Maybe you're grateful that you're learning these prosperity principles that will transform your finances. Don't fake the gratitude. Don't just mentally list things you think you should be grateful for. Actually feel the appreciation in your body. Let genuine thankfulness fill your chest as you acknowledge each blessing, no matter how small it seems. Speak your gratitude out loud if possible. Thank you for the abundance that's already in my life. Thank you for the money I do have. Thank you for my ability to create wealth. Thank you for the prosperity that's flowing to me now. Thank you for tomorrow's blessings that are already prepared in the invisible. Thank you for divine supply that never fails. Then, and this is crucial, extend your gratitude forward in time to money and abundance that hasn't manifested yet, but that you're claiming by faith. Thank you for the unexpected income coming to me this week. Thank you for the raise that's on its way. Thank you for the business opportunity that's about to appear. Thank you for the financial breakthrough I'm about to experience. You're essentially thanking divine intelligence in advance for manifestations that haven't appeared yet in physical form, but that exist already in spiritual reality. This practice of forward gratitude is incredibly powerful because it establishes absolute faith and expectation in your subconscious. When you genuinely thank God or the universe or infinite intelligence for something before you see it, you're demonstrating ultimate trust and certainty. And your subconscious mind, feeling that certainty as you drift into sleep, accepts the future manifestation as already accomplished and begins working to bring it into physical form. There's a beautiful paradox in this practice that Florence Scovel Shinn loved to teach. The more genuinely grateful you are for the little bit of money you have now, the more money flows to you. But most people operate in reverse. They think they'll be grateful once they have more money. They're waiting for abundance to appear before they'll feel appreciation. And by holding that consciousness of ingratitude and unappreciation for what they already have, they actually block more from coming. Gratitude is the magnet. Ingratitude is the repellent. When you fall asleep in genuine appreciation for whatever abundance exists in your life right now, even if it's minimal, even if it's far less than you desire, you're vibrating at the frequency that attracts more abundance. Your subconscious spends those powerful sleep hours in gratitude consciousness, which is abundance consciousness, and creates more circumstances to be grateful for. But when you fall asleep in resentment, complaint, or disappointment about your finances, you spend those powerful hours in poverty consciousness, creating more lack to resent. Let me tell you about a woman who learned this principle in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. She was in her 60s, had worked her entire life, but had no retirement savings due to a series of financial disasters beyond her control. She was living on minimal Social Security payments, barely enough to cover rent and food, with nothing left over for anything else. She felt bitter about her situation, angry that she'd worked so hard with so little to show for it, resentful that other people seemed to have abundance while she struggled. A friend gave her one of Florence Scovel Shinn's books, and she read about this gratitude sleep practice. At first, she dismissed it as naive, positive thinking, disconnected from the harsh realities of actual poverty. But something kept pulling her back to it. One night, feeling particularly desperate and depressed, she decided she had nothing to lose by trying it. She lay in bed and forced herself to think of things related to money that she could genuinely appreciate. It was hard at first. Her mind wanted to focus on lack and complaint, but she pushed through and found genuine gratitude for small things. She was grateful she had food in her refrigerator, even though it wasn't much. She was grateful her Social Security check came reliably every month, even though it wasn't enough. She was grateful she had a warm bed to sleep in, even though her apartment was tiny. She was grateful she could still work part-time occasionally, even though her aging body made it difficult. As she spoke these gratitude statements out loud, something unexpected happened. She felt her resentment and bitterness begin to melt. Tears came, but they were tears of release rather than despair. She continued this practice every night for 2 weeks, finding things to be grateful for related to money and abundance, speaking appreciation out loud before sleep. Something in her energy began to shift. The constant anxiety about finances that had been her normal state for years started to ease. She found herself noticing blessings she'd been blind to before. A neighbor who often shared food with her. A thrift store where she found quality items for almost nothing. A community center with free activities she could enjoy. Her perception was changing from focusing on lack to seeing abundance. Then, outer circumstances began shifting in response to her shifted consciousness. A former employer contacted her about a small consulting project that would pay more than she used to make in a month. Someone anonymously paid one of her utility bills in full. She found an envelope with $300 cash on the sidewalk with no identification, which she later learned had been left there intentionally by someone who felt guided to bless a stranger. A distant relative she barely knew passed away and left her $20,000 in the will. Completely unexpected. Within 6 months of starting that simple gratitude practice before sleep, her financial situation had completely transformed. She had more money than she'd had in decades. The bitterness and anxiety had been replaced by peace and trust. And she credited everything to those nightly moments of speaking gratitude for abundance before sleep. She understood that by changing her consciousness through that practice, by spending her powerful sleep hours in appreciation rather than resentment, she had activated spiritual laws that brought abundance flowing to her from sources she never could have predicted or created through effort. This same transformation is available to you starting tonight. No matter how difficult your current financial situation, no matter how justified your worry or complaint might feel, I'm asking you to implement this gratitude sleep practice faithfully. Make it part of your sacred bedtime ritual, along with the prosperity decree and the wealth lullaby. Speak genuine appreciation for whatever abundance exists in your life right now. Thank divine intelligence in advance for the prosperity that's already on its way to you, even though you can't see it yet. Fall asleep in that feeling of grateful abundance rather than fearful lack. And watch how your financial reality begins reorganizing itself to match your new consciousness. Now, I want to address something that comes up for many people when they start working with sleep prosperity practices, and that's the question of dreams. What about the dreams you have during the night? Are they relevant to manifestation? Should you try to control your dreams? What if you have anxiety dreams about money? Florence Scovel Shinn had fascinating teachings about this that are incredibly practical and empowering. She taught that dreams are your subconscious mind's way of communicating with your conscious mind, showing you what beliefs and patterns are running beneath your awareness. If you're having anxiety dreams about poverty or loss, that's not a sign that poverty is coming. It's your subconscious showing you that poverty consciousness is still operating beneath the surface, giving you the opportunity to address it consciously. The dream is actually a gift, revealing hidden programming so you can deliberately reprogram it through the practices we're discussing. Florence also taught that you can give your subconscious specific instructions about what to dream about, especially as you're falling asleep during that receptive hypnagogic state. She encouraged her students to not only speak prosperity decrees, but also to specifically ask their subconscious to show them prosperity dreams, to give them visions of abundance during sleep, to use the dream state as practice for wealth consciousness. The instruction might be as simple as saying before sleep, "Tonight, I dream of abundance. My subconscious shows me visions of prosperity. I see myself wealthy, blessed, divinely supplied. My dreams tonight are practice for my wealthy future." What happens when you give your subconscious these instructions is remarkable. You begin having dreams where you're experiencing abundance, where money flows easily, where you feel secure and prosperous. And because your brain doesn't distinguish between imagined experience and real experience during sleep, these prosperity dreams literally build the same neural pathways that actual prosperity experiences would create. You're essentially pre-living your wealthy future during sleep, creating the brain structures and consciousness patterns that will then attract actual wealth during your waking hours. Some people report that after working with these sleep prosperity practices for a few weeks, they start having what they call teaching dreams, where they receive direct guidance about money, where solutions to financial problems are revealed, where specific actions are shown that lead to abundance. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is your higher consciousness communicating with you through the dream state, giving you divine guidance that can only come through when the conscious mind is quiet during sleep. I'll share one more story before we move to the next section, because this one perfectly demonstrates the power of dream work combined with sleep prosperity practice. There was a young man who learned these teachings from Florence Scovel Shinn when he was completely broke and homeless, sleeping in his car with no clear path forward. He had tried and failed at several business ventures. He was depressed and considering giving up entirely on his dreams of success. Someone told him about Florence's work, and he got one of her books from the library since he couldn't afford to buy it. He read about the sleep prosperity practices and decided to implement them faithfully. Every night before sleeping in his uncomfortable car, he would speak the prosperity decree, repeat the wealth lullaby, express gratitude for whatever blessings he could identify, and specifically ask his subconscious to give him prosperity dreams and divine guidance through dreams. For the first week, nothing changed externally, but he noticed his dreams were becoming more vivid and more focused on themes of abundance and success. In the second week, he had a dream where he clearly saw himself teaching other people about a specific topic he was passionate about. And in the dream, he felt wealthy and fulfilled. The dream was so vivid and felt so real that he couldn't shake it when he woke up. He took that dream as divine guidance and began taking action on it. He started creating free content, teaching what he knew, putting it online even though he had no audience and no clear way to monetize it. He continued his sleep prosperity practices faithfully every night. More guidance dreams came, showing him specific steps to take, revealing resources he didn't know existed, giving him ideas he'd never thought of consciously. Within 3 months, his free content had attracted thousands of followers. Within 6 months, he had monetized it and was making enough to rent an apartment. Within a year, he had built a successful online education business, generating 6 figures. Within 3 years, he was a millionaire, all from following the guidance that came through dreams while practicing prosperity consciousness before sleep. He attributes his entire success to the combination of those bedtime prosperity practices and the dream guidance that followed. He understood that by programming his subconscious for prosperity every night before sleep, he had opened a direct channel to divine intelligence that could guide him to wealth in ways his conscious mind never could have planned. The dreams weren't random. They were his higher consciousness showing him the path to abundance that had always been available, but that he couldn't see until he started working with his subconscious through dedicated sleep practice. Now let me teach you something that takes all of this even deeper, something that Florence Scovel Shinn considered one of the most advanced prosperity teachings. She taught about what she called the midnight decree, a specific practice for people who wake up during the night, which most people do at some point during sleep. She taught that these middle-of-the-night waking moments are actually golden opportunities for prosperity programming, because you're in an even more receptive state than when you first fall asleep. When you wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., your conscious mind is still mostly asleep. You're in that liminal space between unconscious and conscious, between sleeping and waking. Your critical faculty is completely offline. Your subconscious is utterly open and receptive. And if you know what to do during these moments, you can program prosperity consciousness so deeply that it transforms your financial reality at quantum levels. Here's the midnight decree practice Florence Scovel Shinn taught. When you wake during the night, instead of lying there worrying or trying to force yourself back to sleep or checking your phone, take a moment to speak a short prosperity statement into that highly receptive consciousness. It can be as simple as, "Divine abundance is flowing to me now. I am wealthy. I am blessed. I am divinely supplied." Speak it a few times. Feel it as true. Then allow yourself to drift back to sleep with that as your final conscious thought. What makes this so powerful is that you're catching your subconscious in the most open state it ever reaches. The late night or early morning hours between sleep cycles are when the veil between conscious and subconscious is thinnest, when spiritual connection is strongest, when manifestation power is most concentrated. Mystics throughout history have known this, which is why so many spiritual practices involve waking in the middle of the night for prayer or meditation. They're accessing that sacred time, when the material world is quietest and the spiritual realm is most accessible. But Florence Scovel Shinn also taught a very practical way to use these midnight waking moments specifically for financial manifestation. She recommended keeping a notepad by your bed, specifically for recording any insights, ideas, or guidance that comes during these night waking moments. Often, the most brilliant solutions to financial problems come during these times because your conscious analytical mind is offline and your intuitive, creative, spiritually connected mind has space to operate. How many times have you woken in the middle of the night with a flash of insight about something, only to fall back asleep and forget it completely by morning? These insights are divine guidance trying to reach you through the open channel of your sleeping consciousness. Florence taught that you should honor these moments by capturing what comes through, whether it's an idea for making money, a solution to a financial problem, or simply a powerful prosperity affirmation that appears in your mind. She told a story about a businessman who was on the verge of bankruptcy, unable to see any way to save his failing company. He had tried everything his conscious mind could think of with no success. Then he learned about Florence's teaching on midnight decrees and dream guidance. He started implementing the bedtime prosperity practices faithfully, and he also put a notepad by his bed to capture anything that came during night waking moments. For the first several nights, nothing particularly significant came through, but he kept faith with the practice. Then one night, he woke at 3:30 in the morning with a complete business solution fully formed in his mind. It was an approach he had never consciously considered, a way of restructuring his company and repositioning his products that came to him whole and complete during that middle-of-the-night waking. He immediately wrote it all down before it could fade, filling several pages with the detailed plan that had appeared in his consciousness. The next day, he began implementing what had come through that night. Within weeks, it was clear the new approach was working. Within months, his company had turned around completely. Within a year, he was more profitable than he'd ever been, and he credited the entire turnaround to that single moment of middle-of-the-night divine guidance that could only reach him when his analytical conscious mind was asleep and his intuitive spiritual connection was fully open. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn taught people not to resent waking during the night or to see it as a problem to fix. She taught that these wakings are often orchestrated by divine intelligence to give you access to guidance and wisdom that can't reach you during waking hours when your conscious mind is too active and your critical faculty is blocking higher wisdom. When you wake at night, before you do anything else, speak a prosperity decree into that open consciousness. Then stay receptive for a few moments to see if any insights, ideas, or guidance come through. And keep that notepad ready to capture whatever appears, because it might be the million-dollar idea that changes your entire financial future. Now let me share with you what Florence Scovel Shinn taught about the morning practice that completes the sleep prosperity cycle. She taught that how you wake up and what you do in those first moments of consciousness in the morning is just as important as what you do before sleep. Because just as the transition into sleep is a prime time for programming the subconscious, the transition out of sleep is a prime time for setting your conscious intention for the day ahead. Most people wake up and immediately check their phones, dive into worry about the day ahead, or jump right into activity without any conscious transition. Florence taught that this wastes one of the most powerful moments available for prosperity consciousness. She recommended a specific morning practice that takes only a few minutes, but that sets your entire day on a trajectory of abundance rather than lack. Here's the morning prosperity practice she taught. The moment you wake up, before you open your eyes, before you move your body, before you start thinking about your to-do list or problems or responsibilities, take a moment to speak gratitude for the night's sleep and the prosperity programming that occurred while you slept. Say something like, "Thank you for the perfect sleep and the divine work that was done in my consciousness while I rested. My subconscious mind has been aligned with infinite abundance during the night. I wake up magnetized to money, attracting wealth, ready to receive prosperity from expected and unexpected sources today." Then, still lying in bed, take a moment to imagine your day unfolding with ease and abundance. See yourself moving through your day, feeling prosperous, blessed, divinely guided. Imagine unexpected money coming to you. See opportunities appearing. Feel the sensation of financial ease and security. You're essentially pre-living your day in consciousness, creating a template that your subconscious will work to manifest in physical form as the day unfolds. Only after you've done this brief morning practice should you open your eyes and begin your day. Florence taught that these first conscious moments of the day are when you set your energetic frequency for the next 16 hours or so. If you wake up and immediately dive into stress, worry, hurry, or negative thinking, you're setting your frequency at lack and struggle, and your day will tend to reflect that frequency. But if you wake up in gratitude, abundance consciousness, and positive expectation, you set your frequency at prosperity, and your day organizes itself around that frequency. She told a powerful story about a woman who was a chronic worrier, someone who would wake up every morning with immediate anxiety about money, mentally reviewing all her financial problems before she even got out of bed. This woman's days were consistently stressful, full of financial emergencies and setbacks, reinforcing her belief that money was always a problem. When she came to Florence for help, Florence immediately identified her morning consciousness practice, or lack thereof, as the core issue. Florence taught her the morning prosperity practice, emphasizing that she must not allow any worry or negative thinking until after she had completed the practice. The woman agreed to try it, even though it felt almost impossible to not immediately worry upon waking, when financial stress had been her morning companion for years. The first few mornings were difficult. Her mind wanted to jump straight into anxiety, but she forced herself to speak the gratitude statement and imagine her day going well before allowing any other thoughts. Something remarkable began happening within just a few days. She noticed her entire morning energy felt different. She felt more peaceful, more optimistic, more capable. And then her days began reflecting that changed morning consciousness. Financial emergencies stopped happening. Unexpected blessings started appearing. Problems that had seemed insurmountable began resolving naturally. Within a month, her chronic morning anxiety about money had been completely replaced by morning gratitude and expectation of abundance. She told Florence that the practice had changed everything because it had shifted the energetic frequency she was setting first thing each day. Instead of programming lack consciousness as her first act of the day, she was now programming abundance consciousness, and her subconscious, receiving this programming in that highly receptive transition out of sleep, was organizing her day accordingly. The external circumstances of her life hadn't changed dramatically yet, but her experience of those circumstances and her ability to handle them had transformed completely, which then led to gradual improvement in the circumstances themselves. This morning practice combined with the evening practices creates a complete prosperity cycle. You're bookending your sleep hours with abundance consciousness, programming prosperity as you go into sleep and reinforcing it as you come out of sleep. You're using the most receptive moments available, both the transition into unconsciousness and the transition back to consciousness, to imprint wealth consciousness so deeply that it becomes your automatic operating system. Now, I know some of you listening might be thinking, this all sounds wonderful, but I'm so exhausted at night that I can barely function by bedtime. How am I supposed to implement these practices when I'm falling asleep the moment my head hits the pillow? This is a valid concern, and Florence Scovel Shinn addressed it directly in her teachings. She said that if you're too tired to speak lengthy decrees or do elaborate practices, then simplify to the bare essentials, but don't skip the practice entirely. The bare minimum practice, according to Florence, is this. As you're lying down to sleep, no matter how exhausted you are, simply say one sentence before you lose consciousness. I am rich and I sleep in peace. That's it. Just those 8 words spoken with as much conviction as you can muster in your exhausted state. And then in the morning, no matter how rushed you are, speak one sentence before you get out of bed. I wake up blessed and abundant. Those 2 simple practices, one sentence at night and one sentence in the morning, will begin shifting your consciousness even if you can't do anything more elaborate. Florence taught that consistency matters more than complexity. It's better to do a simple practice every single night and every single morning without fail than to do elaborate practices occasionally when you have time and energy. The power is in the repetition, in the daily programming, in the consistent impression on the subconscious. Even simple statements repeated faithfully every day will rewire prosperity consciousness over time because you're working with the cumulative power of habit and the plasticity of the sleeping mind. She also taught something that I think is crucial for modern listeners to understand. She said that the length of sleep doesn't matter nearly as much as the quality of consciousness you hold while falling asleep and while waking up. You could sleep 10 hours, but spend those 10 hours with poverty consciousness running in your subconscious, and you'd wake up programmed for lack. Or you could sleep only 6 hours, but fall asleep in abundance consciousness and wake up in gratitude consciousness. And those 6 hours would program you for prosperity more effectively than the 10 hours of unconscious sleep. This is liberating for people who struggle with insomnia or who have demanding schedules that limit sleep time. You're not at a disadvantage if you can't sleep 8 hours every night. What matters is the consciousness you bring to whatever sleep you do get. 5 hours of sleep, bookended by prosperity practices, is more valuable for manifestation than 8 hours of sleep with no conscious programming at all. Now let me share one final element of Florence Scovel Shinn's sleep prosperity teaching that ties everything together beautifully. She taught about what she called the cumulative power of the practice, the way these seemingly simple nighttime and morning rituals compound over time to create massive transformation that seems miraculous to people who don't understand the spiritual mechanics behind it. She compared it to compound interest in a bank account. One night of prosperity sleep practice produces a tiny shift in consciousness that you might not even notice. But that tiny shift is real. It's a small deposit in your consciousness bank account. The next night, you make another small deposit, and another, and another. Each individual deposit seems insignificant, but they're accumulating, compounding, building on each other in ways you can't see from day to day. Then suddenly, after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days of faithful practice, you wake up one morning and realize everything has changed. Your relationship with money feels completely different. Your financial circumstances have shifted dramatically. Opportunities you couldn't have imagined are appearing in your life. Money is flowing more easily than ever before, and you might be tempted to think it happened suddenly, miraculously, out of nowhere. But Florence would say it didn't happen suddenly at all. It happened gradually through consistent daily practice that was building and compounding beneath the surface until it reached critical mass and manifested in visible transformation. This understanding is so important because it gives you faith to continue practicing even when you don't see immediate results. You're making deposits in your consciousness bank account every single night. You're accumulating prosperity credits in the invisible realm. You're building momentum that must eventually manifest in physical form, because that's how spiritual law works. The practice is never wasted. Every night counts. Every morning matters. And the cumulative effect of faithful practice is exponentially more powerful than you could accomplish through any amount of daytime effort and struggle. Florence Scovel Shinn would often tell students who were getting discouraged about lack of immediate results, "You wouldn't plant a seed and dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. You trust the process. You water it faithfully. You give it time. And eventually, you see the sprout break through the soil, then the plant appears, then the fruit manifests." Your prosperity consciousness is exactly the same. You're planting seeds every night with these practices. You're watering them with consistency, and if you give them time and don't abandon the process prematurely, the harvest is absolutely guaranteed because you're working with spiritual law that cannot fail. This is my invitation to you tonight. Commit to these sleep prosperity practices for at least 90 days without evaluating results or judging whether they're working. 90 days of speaking prosperity decrees before sleep. 90 days of falling asleep repeating wealth affirmations. 90 days of gratitude practice as you drift off. 90 days of morning abundance consciousness upon waking. 90 days of capturing midnight insights if you wake during the night. Make this your sacred commitment, your spiritual practice, your non-negotiable daily ritual. And I can promise you this based on Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings and the testimony of thousands who have practiced these principles faithfully. If you implement these practices consistently for 90 days, your financial reality will transform. Maybe not in the specific way you're imagining, maybe not according to your timeline, but it will transform because you will have spent 90 nights building prosperity consciousness while your brain was in its most receptive state. And that accumulated consciousness must manifest in changed circumstances because consciousness always creates reality. As we come to the end of this first section, I want you to understand something profound. You have been given access tonight to ancient wisdom that most people never discover in their entire lives. You now know that sleep is not just physical rest, but spiritual opportunity. You understand that those hours of unconsciousness are actually your most powerful manifestation time. You've learned specific practices used by prosperity mystics for generations to rewire wealth consciousness during sleep. And most importantly, you now have a clear path forward to transform your financial reality, not through more effort and struggle during waking hours, but through sacred practice during those precious hours of rest. Tonight, when you lie down to sleep, everything changes. You're no longer just going to bed. You're entering your prosperity portal. You're stepping into your nightly appointment with infinite abundance. You're accessing the divine workshop where miracles are crafted while your body rests. And you're doing it consciously, intentionally, with practices that harness the full power of your sleeping mind for wealth manifestation. Before we move into the next section where we'll explore even deeper dimensions of sleep prosperity practice, I want you to take a moment right now to commit. Say out loud, I commit to using my sleep time for prosperity programming. Starting tonight, I practice sacred bedtime rituals that align my consciousness with wealth. I am grateful for this wisdom, and I implement it faithfully. Speaking that commitment out loud, even if you're listening in a public place and can only whisper it, activates something in your consciousness and sets the intention that will carry you forward into consistent practice. Now I want to reveal to you something that Florence Scovel Shinn taught only to her most advanced students, something she called the sleep transmission principle. And this teaching alone has the potential to multiply the effectiveness of everything we've discussed so far by a factor of 10. She discovered through years of working with consciousness that during certain stages of sleep, particularly the deep delta wave states, your subconscious mind is not only receptive to programming from your own thoughts and words, but also from what she called divine transmission, direct downloads of wisdom, abundance consciousness, and creative solutions from infinite intelligence itself. Think about it this way. During your waking hours, your conscious mind acts like a filter, analyzing everything, questioning everything, doubting everything that doesn't match your existing belief system. This filter is necessary for functioning in the physical world, but it also blocks access to higher wisdom and divine guidance that's constantly being transmitted from the spiritual realm. But during deep sleep, particularly during those delta wave states when your brain is operating at its slowest frequencies, that conscious filter completely shuts down, and your subconscious becomes like a clear, open channel, a pure receiver with no interference or static. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that if you set the proper intention before sleep, if you specifically ask to receive divine transmission of prosperity consciousness while you sleep, infinite intelligence will actually program your subconscious with wealth, consciousness far more sophisticated and powerful than anything you could create through your own affirmations or visualizations. You're essentially asking the source of all abundance to directly install prosperity software into your consciousness while you're in the most receptive state possible. The way to activate this sleep transmission principle is beautifully simple but profoundly powerful. After you've spoken your bedtime prosperity decree and before you begin repeating your wealth lullaby, add one more element. Say something like this, speaking directly to divine intelligence. As I sleep tonight, I open myself completely to receive divine transmission of perfect prosperity consciousness. Download into my subconscious mind the wealth programs, abundance beliefs, and prosperity patterns that align me with unlimited supply. Program me for success while I sleep. Install millionaire consciousness in me during these hours of rest. I surrender to your perfect work in my sleeping mind. What you're doing with this practice is essentially getting out of your own way and allowing divine intelligence, which knows far more about creating wealth than your limited human mind, to do the programming work for you. You're not trying to figure out what beliefs you need or what affirmations will work best. You're simply opening yourself as a vessel and allowing infinite wisdom to install whatever consciousness is needed for you to experience the level of abundance that's been prepared for you. Florence told a remarkable story about a young woman who was struggling as an artist, barely able to pay rent, convinced that she would never be able to make a living from her creative work because the market was too competitive and she didn't have the business skills necessary to succeed. This woman learned about the sleep transmission principle from Florence and decided to implement it faithfully every night. She would ask divine intelligence to download prosperity consciousness into her while she slept, specifically requesting that she be programmed with whatever beliefs, ideas, and capabilities she needed to create abundant income from her art. For the first month, nothing dramatic happened externally. She continued struggling financially, but something was shifting internally that she couldn't quite identify. She felt different somehow, more confident, more creative, more willing to take risks she would have avoided before. Then one night, in her second month of practice, she had an incredibly vivid dream where she saw a complete business model for selling her art that she had never considered consciously. The dream showed her specific steps to take, platforms to use, and ways to position her work that would attract buyers. The next morning, she wrote down everything she remembered from the dream and began implementing it immediately, trusting that this was divine transmission giving her the prosperity blueprint she'd been asking for. Within weeks, her art started selling consistently. Within 3 months, she was making more from her creative work than she'd ever made at any job. Within a year, she was earning 6 figures as an artist, something she had believed was impossible just 12 months earlier. She told Florence that the dream had given her not just business strategy, but also complete confidence and certainty that success was possible and meant for her. The divine transmission during sleep had installed both the practical knowledge and the consciousness of worthiness and capability that she'd been lacking. Her subconscious had been programmed with millionaire artist consciousness while she slept, and then her outer reality reorganized itself to match that new internal programming. This same divine transmission is available to you every single night if you know how to ask for it and how to receive it. You don't have to figure out your prosperity path through conscious effort and struggle. You can literally sleep your way to wealth by allowing divine intelligence to program your subconscious with perfect abundance consciousness while your body rests. This is perhaps the most effortless path to prosperity that exists because you're not doing the work. You're simply creating the conditions for divine intelligence to do the work through you while you sleep. Now let me teach you something else that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about sleep and prosperity that most people never realize, and this relates to the power of repetition during sleep hours. She taught that your subconscious mind during sleep is extraordinarily receptive to repetitive messages, far more so than during waking hours when the conscious mind gets bored with repetition and starts tuning it out. This is why listening to recorded prosperity affirmations while you sleep can be incredibly powerful. something that wasn't available in Florence's time, but that we have access to now through modern technology. When you listen to prosperity affirmations, abundance teachings, or wealth consciousness programming while you're asleep, your subconscious mind absorbs and integrates that information without any resistance or filtering from the conscious mind. The messages bypass your critical faculty completely and go straight into your unconscious programming. And because the messages are repeated hundreds or even thousands of times during a full night's sleep, they create deep grooves in your subconscious, forming new neural pathways, building new belief structures, installing new operating systems for your relationship with money. Florence would have loved this technology because it automates the prosperity programming process. Instead of having to consciously repeat affirmations, which requires effort and discipline and time during waking hours, you can simply play recorded prosperity programming while you sleep and allow it to do the consciousness work for you automatically. You're getting reprogrammed for wealth while you're completely unconscious, waking up with new prosperity consciousness installed without having to do anything except sleep. But Florence would also emphasize, and this is crucial, that the content of what you listen to during sleep matters enormously. Your subconscious during sleep accepts whatever it hears as truth without question or evaluation. This means you must be very careful about what voices and messages you allow into your consciousness during those vulnerable hours. Listening to news, drama, or anything with negative content while you sleep would program poverty and limitation into your subconscious just as powerfully as prosperity content programs abundance. This is why I've created this particular sleep content that you're listening to right now. It's specifically designed to program prosperity consciousness while you rest, whether you're listening actively while awake or passively while drifting off to sleep. Every word, every story, every teaching is carefully crafted to imprint abundance beliefs, wealth consciousness, and prosperity patterns into your receptive subconscious mind. You can let this play on repeat throughout your entire night's sleep, and your subconscious will be absorbing these prosperity frequencies for 8 hours straight, building wealth consciousness while your body restores itself physically. Let me share with you one more profound teaching that Florence Scovel Shinn gave about the relationship between sleep and financial manifestation. And this teaching connects sleep practice with action during waking hours in a way that creates maximum manifestation power. She taught that the prosperity consciousness you build during sleep hours must be maintained and reinforced during waking hours through what she called living from your vision rather than from your circumstances. Most people wake up from sleep and immediately return to operating from their current circumstances. They look at their bank account balance and let that determine their consciousness for the day. They review their bills and debts and let that create their emotional state. They think about their job situation or lack thereof and let that dictate their sense of possibility. Essentially, they allow physical reality to determine their consciousness, which means they're locked into perpetuating the same reality because consciousness creates circumstances, not the other way around. But Florence taught that if you want the prosperity consciousness you're building during sleep to actually manifest in changed circumstances, you must learn to live from your vision of abundance rather than from your current reality of limitation when you wake up. This means you make decisions during the day as if you're already wealthy, as if the prosperity you've been programming during sleep is already real. You move through your day with the energy, confidence, and generosity of an abundant person rather than the anxiety, fear, and scarcity mentality of someone who's broke. This doesn't mean spending money you don't have or making irresponsible choices. It means embodying wealth consciousness in your thoughts, words, emotions, and energy throughout your waking hours. It means refusing to speak poverty even when your circumstances seem to justify it. It means staying in gratitude and expectation of abundance even when your bank account is low. It means making small, generous gestures when possible, even if you don't have much to give. It means walking with your head up and shoulders back, carrying yourself like someone who's blessed and prosperous rather than someone who's struggling and defeated. Florence told a powerful story about a man who was practicing sleep prosperity programming faithfully, but wasn't seeing much change in his circumstances because during his waking hours, he completely contradicted everything he was programming during sleep. He would wake up, check his bank account, panic about his lack of money, spend the day worrying and complaining about bills, speak constantly about being broke, and interact with people from an energy of desperation and need. Then he would go to bed at night and try to program prosperity consciousness during sleep, not understanding that his daytime consciousness was erasing everything he built during nighttime practice. Florence helped him understand that sleep prosperity practice is like planting seeds at night. But if you spend your days pulling up those seeds to check if they're growing, complaining about how long it's taking, and saturating the soil with fear and doubt, the seeds will never have a chance to grow. She taught him that he needed to maintain prosperity consciousness during waking hours, living as if the seeds he was planting at night were already growing beneath the surface, even though he couldn't see evidence yet. He committed to this practice of living from his vision rather than his circumstances. When he woke up each morning, instead of immediately checking his bank account and spiraling into financial anxiety, he would spend the first 30 minutes maintaining the prosperity consciousness he'd built during sleep. He would speak affirmations, express gratitude, visualize abundance, and set his energetic frequency for the day before engaging with any physical reality that might pull him back into poverty consciousness. Throughout his day, whenever he noticed himself starting to slip back into worry or scarcity thinking, he would pause, take a breath, and reconnect with the prosperity consciousness from his sleep practice. He would ask himself, how would I think, feel, speak, and act if I were already wealthy? And then he would adjust his energy accordingly. He refused to speak lack even when others around him complained about money. He maintained generous energy even when his circumstances were tight. He carried himself with confidence and gratitude, even when he couldn't see evidence that things were improving. Within 2 months of maintaining this alignment between sleep prosperity practice and waking consciousness, his entire financial reality transformed dramatically. He received a job offer that doubled his income. Old debts were forgiven through circumstances he couldn't have predicted. Money arrived from sources he never expected. But more than the external changes, what shifted was his entire relationship with money and his sense of identity. He genuinely felt like a wealthy person now, not someone trying to become wealthy. And that shift in identity and consciousness is what created the outer transformation. This is the complete formula that Florence Scovel Shinn taught for using sleep as your primary prosperity tool. Program abundance consciousness during sleep hours through decrees, lullabies, gratitude practice, divine transmission, and repetitive messaging. Then maintain and embody that consciousness during waking hours by living from your vision rather than your circumstances. The sleep practice builds the consciousness. The waking practice protects and reinforces it. Together, they create unstoppable momentum toward wealth manifestation because you're operating from prosperity consciousness 24 hours a day rather than just during brief affirmation sessions. Now I want to teach you about something that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered regarding the specific sleep cycles and stages that are most powerful for different types of prosperity programming. Because not all sleep is created equal when it comes to manifestation work. Modern science has confirmed that we cycle through different stages of sleep multiple times each night, and each stage has distinct characteristics and serves different purposes. Florence intuitively understood this long before sleep science could explain it, and she taught specific practices for working with different sleep stages. The first stage of sleep, that twilight zone between waking and sleeping that we've already discussed as the hypnagogic state, is optimal for general prosperity programming and for setting intentions for the night's manifestation work. This is when you speak your decrees, your lullabies, your gratitude, and your requests for divine transmission. You're essentially giving your subconscious its assignment for the night, programming what you want it to work on while you're fully unconscious. Then as you move into deeper sleep stages, particularly the delta wave deep sleep that usually happens in the first third of the night, this is when the most profound subconscious reprogramming occurs. Your brain waves slow down to their lowest frequency. Your conscious mind is completely offline, and your subconscious is in its most receptive, most malleable state. This is when listening to recorded prosperity programming is most effective, because your subconscious is absorbing information like a sponge with absolutely no resistance or filtering. Florence taught that if you could somehow program your subconscious specifically during these deep delta sleep stages, you could accomplish in one night what might take months of daytime affirmation work. This is why she was such a strong advocate for bedtime prosperity practice, because even though she couldn't use audio technology, she understood that the programming you install right before sleep works its way deep into your consciousness during those delta stages. Then in the later cycles of sleep, particularly during REM sleep when your brain becomes more active and you dream, this is when your subconscious processes the programming you've given it and begins creating new neural pathways, new belief structures, and new behavioral patterns based on that programming. The dreams you have during REM sleep are actually your subconscious working out how to integrate new prosperity consciousness with your existing belief systems, resolving conflicts between old scarcity programming and new abundance programming. This is why people sometimes have anxiety dreams about money when they first start sleep prosperity practice. It's not a sign that the practice isn't working or that poverty is coming. It's actually evidence that deep transformation is happening, that old fear-based beliefs about money are being brought to the surface to be released so they can be replaced with abundance beliefs. Florence taught that you should welcome these processing dreams as signs of progress rather than viewing them as setbacks. She also taught a specific practice for working with dream content to accelerate prosperity manifestation. She recommended keeping what she called a dream prosperity journal by your bedside, where you record any dreams related to money, abundance, success, or financial matters immediately upon waking. Then you interpret those dreams not through conventional dream analysis, but through the lens of prosperity consciousness, always looking for the hidden abundance message or divine guidance within the dream rather than interpreting it as warning or prediction of lack. For example, if you dream that you're losing money or that your wallet is empty, instead of interpreting this as a prediction of financial loss, Florence taught that you should interpret it as your subconscious showing you an old fear belief that's being released to make room for abundance consciousness. The dream is revealing what's being cleared out, not what's coming in. She would say, "Thank you for showing me this old poverty belief. I release it now completely. It has no power over my financial reality." Or if you dream about finding money, receiving unexpected wealth, or experiencing abundance in any form, Florence taught that you should treat this as prophetic dream guidance, showing you that prosperity is already manifesting in the invisible realm and will soon appear in physical form. She would recommend writing in your dream journal, "This dream is divine confirmation that abundance is flowing to me now. I accept this as spiritual fact, and I expect physical manifestation soon." The power of this practice is that you're training your consciousness to interpret everything through the lens of prosperity, rather than through the lens of lack and fear. Over time, this prosperity interpretation becomes automatic, and you find yourself naturally seeing abundance everywhere, which then attracts more abundance into your experience because you're vibrating at the frequency of wealth consciousness consistently. Let me share a profound story that illustrates the power of dream work combined with sleep prosperity practice. There was a woman who came to Florence Scovel Shinn in complete financial desperation. She was a single mother with 4 children, working 3 jobs, but still unable to keep up with basic expenses. She was so exhausted and overwhelmed that she had almost no time for conscious prosperity practice during her waking hours. But she had approximately 5 or 6 hours of sleep each night, and Florence taught her to make those sleep hours her primary prosperity practice time. The woman began implementing everything we've discussed. She spoke prosperity decrees before sleep, even though she was exhausted. She repeated wealth lullabies as she drifted off. She expressed gratitude for whatever small blessings she could identify. She asked for divine transmission of prosperity consciousness while she slept, and she began keeping a dream journal to record any dreams related to money or abundance. For the first week, her dreams were chaotic and anxiety-filled, processing years of accumulated financial stress and fear. But she followed Florence's guidance and interpreted even the anxiety dreams as evidence of old programming being released rather than as predictions of disaster. She would write in her journal, "My subconscious is clearing out poverty consciousness to make room for wealth. This is progress." And she kept faithfully practicing her sleep prosperity rituals every single night without fail, trusting the process even when she saw no external evidence of change. In the second week, her dreams began shifting. Instead of anxiety dreams about losing money or being unable to pay bills, she started having dreams where she found money, received unexpected gifts, or experienced situations of ease and plenty. She recorded these dreams and interpreted them as prophetic guidance, showing her that abundance was already manifesting in the invisible realm. And she noticed her waking consciousness beginning to shift as well. The constant background anxiety about money that had been her normal state for years was beginning to ease, even though her circumstances hadn't changed yet. Then, in the third week, something extraordinary happened. She had a dream so vivid it was more like a vision than an ordinary dream. In this dream, she saw herself working from home in a specific type of business that she had never consciously considered. The dream showed her exactly what to do, how to set it up, and who to contact for help. She woke from this dream with absolute certainty that it was divine guidance, direct transmission from infinite intelligence, showing her the path to financial freedom. Despite her exhaustion and overwhelm, despite having no idea how she would find time to start a business while working 3 jobs, she acted on the dream guidance immediately. She began setting up the home business exactly as the dream had shown her, working on it during whatever brief windows of time she could find. And astonishingly, everything fell into place with supernatural ease. The right people appeared to help her. The resources she needed showed up exactly when she needed them. Within 6 weeks of that guidance dream, her home business was generating enough income that she could quit 2 of her 3 jobs. Within 3 months, she was making more from her home business than she had made working 3 jobs combined, and she was able to quit all outside employment and work from home where she could be with her children. Within 6 months, she had more money than she'd ever had in her life, and she was sleeping peacefully through the night instead of lying awake worrying about bills. And she credited the entire transformation to making sleep her primary prosperity practice time and trusting the divine guidance that came through dreams when she opened herself to receive it. Florence Scovel Shinn would often say about stories like this, "This is not a special miracle reserved for a lucky few. This is spiritual law operating exactly as it's designed to operate. When you align your consciousness with abundance, particularly during sleep when your subconscious is most receptive, the universe must respond by bringing you opportunities, resources, and guidance that lead to prosperity. It's law, not luck." Now I want to teach you something that Florence discovered about the power of combining sleep prosperity practice with specific physical rituals that anchor the consciousness work in your body and your environment. Because prosperity is not just a mental or spiritual state. It must be embodied and grounded in physical form to manifest fully. She taught several bedtime rituals that work in conjunction with the consciousness practices we've been discussing to create maximum manifestation power. One of the most powerful physical rituals Florence taught was what she called the bedtime money blessing ceremony. Here's how it works. Before you go to bed each night, take out whatever money you have in your possession, whether it's cash in your wallet, coins in a jar, or even just a single dollar bill. Hold this money in your hands while you're sitting on your bed preparing for sleep. Look at the money. Feel the texture of it. Acknowledge that this physical money is a symbol and representation of the infinite supply that's available to you from divine source. Then speak a specific blessing over the money while holding it. Florence's recommended blessing went something like this. I bless this money. I bless all money that flows through my life. This money represents infinite abundance. As I hold this money in my hands, I feel connected to unlimited supply. Tonight as I sleep, this money multiplies. Divine supply increases it. Spiritual law expands it. I wake tomorrow with increased prosperity consciousness and increased money flow. This money is blessed, multiplied, and circulated for the highest good. After speaking this blessing, Florence taught that you should sleep with the money under your pillow or on your nightstand, where your subconscious knows it's present even while you're unconscious. This physical proximity to money while you sleep, combined with the blessing you spoke over it, creates what she called a sympathetic vibration between your consciousness and wealth energy. Your subconscious mind, knowing that blessed money is right there with you as you sleep, begins to identify you as someone who has money, someone who's connected to abundance, someone who's worthy of wealth. It might sound superstitious or magical to modern rational minds, but Florence would explain it through the principle of physical anchoring of consciousness. Your subconscious mind thinks in symbols and responds to physical rituals. When you create a deliberate ceremony around money before sleep, when you bless it and sleep with it near you, you're telling your subconscious at a level deeper than words. I am aligned with money. Money and I are friends. Money is safe and welcome in my life. I deserve to have money. Money sleeps with me and wakes with me. This subconscious messaging is incredibly powerful for dissolving hidden blocks to receiving wealth. Florence told a story about a woman who had a severe phobia about money. Unconscious fear programming from childhood trauma around finances that made her literally uncomfortable handling cash or even thinking about wealth. This woman was spiritually evolved in many ways, but financially destitute because of these deep money blocks she couldn't seem to overcome through any amount of conscious affirmation or visualization work. Florence taught her this bedtime money blessing ritual, instructing her to start with just a single dollar bill if that's all she felt comfortable with. The first night, the woman felt ridiculous performing the ritual, almost embarrassed, even though she was alone. But she did it faithfully, blessing her $1 bill and placing it under her pillow. The next morning, she noticed she felt slightly less anxious about money than usual. Just a small shift, but noticeable. She continued the practice every night for 2 weeks, and each night she found it easier to hold the money, speak the blessing, and feel positive emotions around wealth instead of fear and anxiety. By the 3rd week, she started adding more money to the ritual, blessing $5, then $10, then $20. Her entire relationship with money was transforming through this simple physical ritual combined with her sleep practice. The fear was dissolving. Money was starting to feel like a friend instead of an enemy. Within 2 months of faithful practice of this bedtime money blessing ritual, her external financial circumstances began transforming dramatically. She received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. She was offered a job with double her previous salary. Old debts were mysteriously forgiven. But more than the external changes, what transformed was her internal relationship with wealth. She could finally hold money, think about money, and speak about money without the paralyzing fear that had controlled her for decades. And once that internal block dissolved, abundance could finally flow to her freely. Now let me teach you another physical ritual that Florence Scovel Shinn recommended for sleep prosperity practice. And this one specifically addresses the common problem of waking up in the middle of the night with financial anxiety. She called this the Midnight Money Mantra, and it's designed to transform those middle-of-the-night waking moments from anxiety spirals into prosperity programming opportunities. Here's the practice. If you wake during the night, and many people do at least once during a typical sleep cycle, instead of lying there worrying about money or checking your phone or tossing and turning in frustration, you immediately begin repeating a very simple phrase silently in your mind. The phrase Florence recommended was, "Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now." Just those 5 words repeated continuously like a mantra until you drift back to sleep. The power of this practice is threefold. First, it interrupts the anxiety spiral that typically happens when people wake at night worrying about finances. Instead of allowing your mind to spiral into worst-case scenarios and fear-based thinking, you're immediately redirecting it to a prosperity statement. Second, you're programming your subconscious in that highly receptive, middle-of-the-night consciousness state with a clear money affirmation. And third, you're making your last conscious thought before returning to sleep a prosperity statement, which means your subconscious works with that programming during the next sleep cycle. Florence emphasized that the simplicity of the phrase is intentional and important. You're not trying to create elaborate affirmations or figure out complex visualizations when you're half asleep at 3 in the morning. You're just repeating 5 simple words that your tired mind can easily hold on to. Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now. The repetition creates a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that actually helps you fall back asleep while simultaneously programming prosperity consciousness. She told a story about a businessman who suffered from severe insomnia, partly caused by financial stress. He would wake multiple times each night, his mind immediately jumping to worry about business problems, cash flow issues, and debt obligations. These middle-of-the-night anxiety sessions were reinforcing poverty consciousness during his most receptive subconscious state, essentially programming failure while his conscious defenses were down. No wonder his business kept struggling despite his hard work during the day. He was undoing all his daytime efforts with nighttime fear programming. Florence taught him the midnight money mantra practice. At first, he was skeptical that such a simple technique could make any difference, but he committed to trying it faithfully. The first night he woke with typical financial anxiety, but instead of indulging the worry spiral, he immediately began repeating, "Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now. Money flows to me now." To his surprise, he fell back asleep within minutes instead of lying awake for hours as usual. He continued this practice every time he woke during the night. Within 2 weeks, he noticed not only was he sleeping better, falling back asleep faster, but his daytime anxiety about finances was also decreasing. Within a month, his business situation began improving in ways he couldn't have predicted. New clients appeared, payment problems resolved, cash flow increased. Within 3 months, his financial situation had completely turned around, and he was sleeping peacefully through most nights without waking at all. He told Florence that the practice had worked on multiple levels simultaneously. It had broken his pattern of middle-of-the-night anxiety programming. It had given his subconscious clear prosperity instructions during its most receptive state, and it had actually helped him sleep better, which improved his overall mental clarity and decision-making ability during the day, which then improved his business performance. One simple 5-word mantra repeated during middle-of-the-night wakings had created a domino effect of positive transformation in every area of his financial life. Now I want to share with you something that Florence Scovel Shinn taught about what she called prosperity sleep environments, because she understood that your physical sleep environment affects your subconscious mind just as powerfully as your conscious thoughts and words. She taught that where you sleep and what surrounds you while you sleep sends constant messages to your subconscious about your worthiness, your value, and your relationship with abundance. If you're sleeping in chaos, clutter, or environments that feel poverty-stricken, your subconscious absorbs those poverty messages all night long, undermining your prosperity affirmations. Florence recommended that people create what she called a prosperity sanctuary in their bedroom, regardless of how small the space or how limited their resources. This doesn't mean you need expensive furniture or luxury bedding, though those are wonderful if you can afford them. It means treating your sleeping space as sacred, keeping it clean, organized, and filled with items that represent abundance to you personally. It means sleeping on the best sheets you can afford, even if that's simple cotton rather than silk. It means having at least one beautiful object in your bedroom that makes you feel prosperous when you look at it. She taught that you should remove from your bedroom anything that represents struggle, poverty, or lack. Old, worn-out items that you're keeping until you can afford better should be removed or replaced if possible, because they're sending poverty messages to your subconscious every night. Clutter and chaos should be cleared because they create mental confusion that blocks prosperity. Anything that reminds you of financial stress or failure should not be in the room where you're trying to program abundance consciousness while you sleep. This might require some practical creativity if your living situation is limited. Florence understood that not everyone could afford to completely redecorate their bedroom, but she taught that even small changes make a difference. Maybe you can't afford new furniture, but you can deeply clean what you have. Maybe you can't buy expensive art, but you can print an image that represents prosperity to you and frame it inexpensively. Maybe you can't purchase luxury bedding, but you can make sure what you have is clean, mended, and as beautiful as possible. Maybe you can't redesign your whole space, but you can create one small prosperity altar or corner with objects that symbolize abundance to you. The subconscious mind responds to symbols and to the overall feeling of your environment. When you walk into your bedroom at night, you should feel a sense of peace, order, and worthiness. Your subconscious should receive the message that you value yourself enough to create beauty in your sleeping space, that you're worthy of sleeping in an environment that feels abundant rather than poverty-stricken. This environmental messaging works on your consciousness all night long while you sleep, either supporting your prosperity affirmations or contradicting them. Florence told a story about a woman who was doing all the right consciousness practices, speaking her prosperity decrees faithfully, maintaining abundance mindset during the day, but seeing minimal results. When Florence visited her home, she immediately identified the problem. The woman's bedroom was cluttered with broken items, old clothes piled everywhere, stained, worn-out bedding, and overall chaos. She was essentially sleeping in a physical representation of poverty consciousness every single night, and that environmental messaging was canceling out her verbal affirmations. Florence helped her understand that she needed to create a prosperity sanctuary in her sleeping space before the consciousness work could fully take root. The woman initially resisted because she felt she couldn't afford to make changes, but Florence showed her how to work with what she already had. They cleaned and organized everything. They removed or repaired broken items. They rearranged furniture to create better flow and openness. They used items she already owned to create small touches of beauty and abundance in the space. The entire transformation cost almost nothing except time and effort. Within days of sleeping in her newly transformed prosperity sanctuary, the woman reported feeling different. She slept better. She woke up in better moods. Her prosperity affirmations felt more real and powerful, and within weeks, her external financial circumstances began shifting for the first time in months of practicing prosperity consciousness. The changed environment had allowed the consciousness work to finally take root and manifest because the physical space was now supporting the mental and spiritual practices instead of contradicting them. Now let me teach you about something Florence Scovel Shinn called the power of pre-sleep visualization, which takes the affirmation work we've discussed to an even deeper level by engaging your imagination and emotions during that crucial transition into sleep. She taught that words alone are powerful, but words combined with vivid mental imagery and genuine feeling create the strongest possible imprint on the subconscious mind. This practice takes just a few additional minutes before sleep, but multiplies the effectiveness of your prosperity programming exponentially. Here's how pre-sleep visualization works, according to Florence's teaching. After you've spoken your prosperity decree and expressed your gratitude, before you begin repeating your wealth lullaby, take a few minutes to create a detailed mental movie of your prosperous life. See yourself in your mind's eye waking up in a beautiful home. Feel the quality of the sheets you're sleeping on in your prosperous life. See yourself getting out of bed without any financial anxiety or stress. Watch yourself going through your day with complete confidence and ease about money. Imagine your bank account showing abundant balance. Picture yourself writing checks for whatever you want without concern. See yourself giving generously to causes you care about. Feel the sensation of financial security and freedom throughout your entire body. The key to making this visualization powerful is engaging all your senses and emotions. Not just seeing pictures in your mind, feel the textures, hear the sounds of your prosperous life, smell the scents, taste the experiences. Most importantly, feel the emotions of genuine abundance, the peace, the joy, the freedom, the gratitude. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience with full sensory and emotional engagement and actual physical experience. So when you create this rich, detailed visualization right before sleep and then drift off holding those images and feelings, your brain during sleep processes this as real experience and builds neural pathways accordingly. Florence emphasized that this pre-sleep visualization should not feel like work or strain. You're not trying to force or concentrate intensely. You're simply relaxing into pleasant daydreams about your prosperous life, allowing the images to flow naturally, enjoying the feelings of abundance, making it so real and present in your imagination that your body responds as if it's actually happening. This practice should be pleasurable, something you look forward to, rather than another discipline you're forcing yourself through. She told a beautiful story about a young man who was living in genuine poverty, sleeping on a friend's couch, with no money and seemingly no prospects for improving his situation. He learned about pre-sleep visualization from Florence's teachings and began implementing it faithfully every night. He would lie on that borrowed couch and spend 15 minutes before sleep, visualizing himself living in his own beautiful apartment, sleeping in a comfortable bed, waking up financially secure, moving through his days with abundance and ease. At first, it felt almost painfully unrealistic given his actual circumstances. The contrast between his visualization and his reality was so extreme that he sometimes felt foolish doing the practice. But he persisted because he had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Night after night, he would create this detailed mental movie of prosperity, engaging all his senses, feeling the emotions of financial freedom, making it as real as possible in his imagination before drifting off to sleep. Something remarkable began happening after about 3 weeks of faithful practice. His daytime consciousness started shifting. He began seeing opportunities he'd been blind to before. He felt more confident and capable. He took actions he wouldn't have taken from his previous poverty consciousness. And within 2 months of starting this pre-sleep visualization practice, his entire life had transformed. He got a good job. He moved into his own apartment, the exact one he'd been visualizing. He started building savings. His visualization of prosperity was manifesting in physical form because he'd spent 60 nights building that reality in his consciousness first. He told Florence that the visualization practice had done something his daytime affirmations never could. It had made prosperity feel real to him at an emotional and sensory level rather than just being words he spoke. And once it felt real in his consciousness, once his nervous system and subconscious genuinely believed he was prosperous because he'd experienced it so vividly in imagination night after night, the universe had no choice but to reorganize his external circumstances to match that internal reality. Now, I want to address something crucial that Florence Scovel Shinn taught about patience and faith during the manifestation process. Because many people start sleep prosperity practices with great enthusiasm, but give up too quickly when they don't see immediate results. She taught that there's always a gestation period between planting consciousness seeds and seeing physical harvest. And understanding this prevents discouragement and premature abandonment of the practices. Florence would compare prosperity manifestation to pregnancy. When a woman conceives, she doesn't expect to be holding a baby the next day. She knows there's a 9-month gestation period when the baby is growing and developing in the invisible before birth into the visible. Rushing or worrying doesn't speed the process. Doubting doesn't help. What's required is faith, patience, proper care of the body, and trust in the natural timing of the process. Prosperity manifestation through sleep practice works exactly the same way. When you begin programming prosperity consciousness during sleep, you're planting seeds in your subconscious that must go through a gestation period before they manifest in physical form. Those seeds are growing and developing in the invisible realm of consciousness during that time, even though you can't see evidence yet. The length of the gestation period varies depending on how deeply embedded your old poverty programming was and how consistently you maintain your new prosperity consciousness. But the manifestation is absolutely guaranteed if you don't abort the process by giving up prematurely. Florence taught that during this gestation period, your job is not to keep checking for results, doubting whether it's working, or abandoning the practice because you don't see instant transformation. Your job is to maintain faith, continue the practices faithfully, and trust divine timing. She would say, you wouldn't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing. You trust the process, you water it consistently, and you wait with patient expectation for the sprout to appear in its perfect timing. She told a powerful story about a woman who practiced sleep prosperity programming faithfully for 6 months, with what seemed like absolutely no external results. Her financial situation remained difficult. No unexpected money appeared. No new opportunities manifested. She was tempted to conclude that the teachings didn't work or weren't working for her specifically. But Florence counseled her to continue practicing for a full year without judgment or evaluation, trusting that consciousness work is never wasted even when results aren't immediately visible. The woman committed to continuing. Though she admitted her faith was wavering, she kept speaking her prosperity decrees before sleep. She maintained her visualizations. She fell asleep repeating wealth affirmations. And then suddenly, in month 7, everything exploded in the most beautiful way. 3 different opportunities appeared in the same week. Money came from sources she never could have predicted. Her entire financial situation transformed so rapidly it seemed miraculous. Within 3 months after that initial breakthrough, she had experienced more prosperity than in her previous 10 years combined. She realized that the consciousness work had been happening beneath the surface during those seemingly fruitless 6 months. Her subconscious was being completely rewired. Her energy was shifting. Her worthiness wounds were healing. Invisible preparations were being made. And when the gestation period was complete, when her consciousness had been fully transformed, the physical manifestation appeared almost instantaneously because everything had already been prepared in the invisible realm. The 6 months of faithful practice hadn't been wasted. They'd been essential gestation time preparing her to receive and hold the level of abundance that then manifested. This is why Florence taught that you should commit to at least 90 days of sleep prosperity practice, and ideally 6 months to a year, before evaluating results or deciding whether the teachings work. Give the consciousness seeds time to germinate, take root, grow, and eventually bear fruit in physical form. Trust the process even when you can't see evidence yet. Maintain faith even when circumstances seem unchanged. Continue the practices faithfully, even when doubt whispers that it's not working. This is how you prove to the universe and to your own subconscious that your commitment to prosperity is real, not just temporary enthusiasm that fades when you don't get instant gratification. Now let me share with you one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most advanced teachings about sleep and prosperity, something she called the Divine Sleep Portal. And this teaching elevates everything we've discussed to the highest spiritual level. She taught that sleep is not just a biological process or even just a consciousness reprogramming opportunity. Sleep is actually a portal through which you connect directly with divine intelligence, with infinite source, with what she called the Christ consciousness, or God mind. Every night when you sleep, your individual consciousness temporarily merges with universal consciousness. The illusion of separation that you experience during waking hours dissolves. You're no longer Florence or John or Mary operating as an isolated individual. You're one with the all, connected to everything, accessing the infinite intelligence that created and sustains the entire universe. This is why people often wake with solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable while awake. They've accessed divine mind during sleep where all knowledge exists and all solutions are available. Florence taught that if you understand this truth and consciously invoke it before sleep, if you deliberately surrender yourself into divine consciousness as you drift off, you access levels of prosperity manifestation that transcend anything your individual human mind could create. You're no longer trying to manifest abundance through your limited personal power. You're allowing divine intelligence itself to create prosperity for you through direct connection during sleep. The practice she taught for this highest level of sleep manifestation is beautiful in its simplicity, but profound in its power. After all your prosperity decrees, gratitude, visualizations, and lullabies, as your very last conscious act before sleep takes you, you simply say with complete sincerity and surrender, "Divine intelligence, I give myself completely to you now. Program my consciousness perfectly while I sleep. Create through me whatever prosperity serves your highest purpose. I trust you completely. I surrender into your perfect care. Thy will be done." Then you release all control, all effort, all trying, and simply allow yourself to dissolve into sleep, knowing that divine intelligence has received your request and will work through your sleeping consciousness more perfectly than you could ever direct consciously. This is the ultimate prosperity practice, because you're getting your limited human ego completely out of the way and allowing infinite intelligence to create abundance for you according to divine plan rather than human limitation. Florence told a profound story about a wealthy businessman who had achieved tremendous financial success through effort and strategy, but who felt empty and unfulfilled despite his riches. He came to Florence not seeking more money, but seeking meaning and peace. She taught him this divine sleep portal practice, explaining that true prosperity isn't just money, but alignment with divine purpose, where abundance flows naturally as a byproduct of right relationship with Source. He began practicing nightly surrender into divine intelligence during sleep, releasing his need to control everything, asking to be guided and used for highest purpose rather than for personal gain. At first, nothing seemed to change externally, but internally, He felt a deep peace beginning to grow that he'd never experienced despite his wealth. Then his business began transforming in ways he hadn't consciously planned. New directions opened that felt deeply meaningful. Opportunities appeared that allowed him to serve others while also prospering greatly. Within a year, he was making more money than ever, but in ways that felt joyful and purposeful, rather than stressful and empty. The wealth was flowing through him to bless others rather than just accumulating for personal gain. And he experienced fulfillment that had eluded him during all his years of financially successful but spiritually disconnected living. He told Florence that surrendering into divine intelligence during sleep had given him both prosperity and meaning, both abundance and purpose, both money and peace. This is the ultimate teaching about sleep and prosperity that Florence Scovel Shinn offered. Yes, use sleep to reprogram prosperity consciousness. Yes, practice all the techniques we've discussed, but ultimately, surrender into divine intelligence and allow it to create prosperity for you according to perfect wisdom that sees what you cannot see, knows what you do not know, and has access to resources and opportunities beyond your imagining. Trust the process, maintain the practices, and watch divine intelligence work miracles through your sleeping consciousness. As we complete this second section, I want you to take a moment to commit once more to these practices. Speaking out loud, even if you're in a public place and can only whisper. Say with me, I commit to sacred sleep prosperity practice. Every night, I program abundance consciousness. Every morning, I wake to increased prosperity. I trust divine intelligence working through my sleeping mind. I am patient with the manifestation process. I maintain faith even when I don't see immediate results. My sleep is my most powerful prosperity tool, and I use it faithfully to create the abundant life that is my divine birthright. Now we're going to explore the deepest dimension of sleep prosperity work, moving beyond technique and practice into what can only be described as complete transformation of your entire being at the consciousness level. Everything we've discussed so far has been building toward this moment, preparing you to understand and embody a truth so profound that once you truly grasp it, your relationship with money and sleep and manifestation will never be the same again. You're about to discover why some people seem to manifest wealth effortlessly, while others struggle despite knowing all the right techniques and speaking all the right affirmations. The secret that changes everything is this. Prosperity is not something you do, it's something you become. It's not a practice you perform occasionally when you remember. It's a consciousness you embody continuously, asleep and awake, unconscious and conscious, 24 hours a day without interruption. Most people approach prosperity work as if they're trying to convince the universe to give them something they don't currently have. But the masters throughout history understood that you cannot receive what you do not already embody in consciousness. You must become wealthy internally before you can experience wealth externally. This is where sleep becomes not just a manifestation tool, but a transformation portal. Because during those precious hours of unconsciousness, when your ego identity dissolves and you merge with universal consciousness, you have the opportunity to literally die to your old poverty self and be reborn as your wealthy self. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually at the deepest levels of identity and consciousness. Every night you go to sleep, you can choose to wake up as a different person, someone who genuinely knows themselves to be prosperous rather than someone who's trying to become prosperous. Think about what happens during sleep at the identity level. Your name dissolves, your history dissolves, your story about who you are and what's possible for you dissolves. All the limiting beliefs and poverty programming that define your waking identity go offline. You're no longer playing the character of the struggling person worried about money. Your pure consciousness, unlimited potential, connected to infinite abundance. And in that state of consciousness without identity, you can imprint a completely new identity that you then wake up wearing like new clothes. This is the advanced work that transforms everything. You're not just programming prosperity affirmations into your subconscious during sleep. You're actually dying to your poverty identity and being reborn into wealth identity every single night. You're using sleep as a daily resurrection practice, leaving the old you behind in unconsciousness and emerging as the new you in the morning. This is why people who truly master sleep prosperity experience transformation that seems miraculous to others. They're not just changing their thoughts, they're changing their fundamental identity at the deepest level. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this principle of identity transformation through sleep. There was a man who had practiced prosperity affirmations for years with minimal results. He knew all the right words. He spoke them faithfully. He visualized abundance. But nothing much changed in his external circumstances because his core identity remained that of a poor person trying to become wealthy. He was always reaching for prosperity from outside himself rather than recognizing it as his true nature. Then he encountered teaching about using sleep as identity transformation rather than just consciousness programming. He began approaching his bedtime practice completely differently. Instead of speaking affirmations about wanting to become wealthy, he would lie down at night and consciously release his entire identity as a struggling person. He would literally say to himself, "Tonight, I die to the old me. The person who struggled with money no longer exists. As I sleep, that identity dissolves completely. And tomorrow morning, I wake as my true self, the wealthy being I've always been at my core." This practice felt strange and even frightening at first because we're so attached to our familiar identities even when they're causing us suffering. But he persisted with the practice night after night. Die to the old poverty self. Sleep in pure, unlimited consciousness. Wake as the new wealthy self. And something profound began happening. He started genuinely feeling like a different person, not pretending, not visualizing, actually experiencing himself as someone who was naturally abundant rather than someone struggling to become abundant. His entire energy shifted. His decisions changed. His behavior transformed. He started moving through the world with the confidence and ease of someone who knows they're divinely supplied rather than the anxiety and grasping of someone who fears lack. And of course, his external circumstances began reflecting this new identity. Within 3 months, his income had tripled. Within 6 months, he had paid off debts that had burdened him for years. Within a year, he was wealthier than he'd ever imagined possible. But the wealth wasn't the most important change. What transformed was his entire sense of who he was. He genuinely knew himself to be a prosperous being, rather than someone trying to become prosperous. This is the level of transformation available to you through sacred sleep practice. You're not just reprogramming beliefs or affirming what you want. You're actually transforming your fundamental identity, dying to the old poverty self and being reborn as your wealthy self night after night until the wealthy identity becomes so solid and real that your external world has no choice but to reorganize itself to match. This is consciousness work at the deepest possible level, and sleep is the perfect portal for it because sleep naturally involves a daily dissolution and rebirth of identity. Now let me teach you the specific practice for this identity transformation work during sleep, because it requires a slightly different approach than the affirmation practices we've discussed. This is advanced teaching that produces profound results, but demands genuine commitment and courage, because you're working at the level of who you fundamentally are rather than just what you think or believe. The practice has 3 distinct phases that you move through each night as you prepare for sleep and then drift into unconsciousness. The first phase is the releasing phase. As you lie down to sleep, You consciously acknowledge and release your current identity as someone who struggles with money or lacks abundance. You might say something like, I release the identity of the struggling self. I let go of the story of poverty and limitation. The person who worried about money dissolves now. All beliefs in lack and scarcity are released completely. I surrender this old identity willingly and completely. Speak these words with genuine feeling, actually letting go of that familiar sense of self that's been operating from poverty consciousness. This can bring up fear, because we're so identified with our familiar sense of self, even when it's causing suffering. But breathe through the fear and trust the process of release. The second phase is the void phase. After you've released your old identity, spend a few moments resting in pure consciousness without any identity at all. You're not the old poverty self anymore, but you're not yet claiming the new wealthy self. You're simply awareness itself, unlimited potential, pure being. This void space might feel uncomfortable because we're conditioned to always have a sense of self, always be somebody. But this void is actually your true nature, consciousness before it takes any particular form. Rest here for a few minutes, just being pure awareness without any story about who you are or what your circumstances are. This void is the womb from which your new identity will be born. The third phase is the rebirth phase. From that void of pure consciousness, you now consciously claim and embody your new identity as a wealthy being. Not as something you hope to become, but as what you already are at your essential nature. You might say, I am prosperity itself. Abundance is my true nature. I am one with infinite supply. The wealthy self is who I truly am and have always been. I accept this identity completely now. Speak these words with authority and certainty, genuinely stepping into this new identity like putting on new clothes. Feel it in your body. Sense it in your awareness. Know it as truth. Then fall asleep holding this new identity, allowing your subconscious to integrate it during the night. When you wake in the morning, the crucial practice is to immediately reconnect with this wealthy identity before your old familiar poverty identity has a chance to reassert itself. Before you open your eyes, before you check your phone, before you think about your day, remind yourself, I am the wealthy self. Yesterday's struggling identity no longer exists. I wake as prosperity itself. Then move through your day consciously maintaining this identity, making decisions from it, speaking from it, acting from it, until it becomes so natural and automatic that you genuinely cannot remember what it felt like to be the old, poverty-identified self. This practice requires consistency over time. You're literally rewiring your sense of self at the deepest level, and that doesn't happen overnight. But if you practice this identity transformation ritual faithfully every night for 90 days, dying to the old self and being reborn as the wealthy self, you will be a fundamentally different person by the end of those 90 days. And your external circumstances will have reorganized themselves to reflect your new internal identity, because that's how consciousness creates reality. Let me share another story that demonstrates the power of this identity transformation work. There was a woman who had grown up in extreme poverty and carried deep unconscious identification with being poor. Even after she had worked her way into a decent middle-class life, she still felt like a poor person inside. She was always waiting for disaster to strike, always fearing she would lose everything and end up destitute again, always identifying fundamentally as someone who came from nothing and could return to nothing at any moment. She learned about this sleep identity transformation practice and began implementing it faithfully. Every night, she would consciously release her identity as someone who came from poverty and whose essential nature was lack. She would rest in the void of pure consciousness. Then she would claim her new identity as someone who was fundamentally wealthy at their core, someone whose true nature was abundance, regardless of external circumstances. She practiced this release, void, and rebirth cycle every single night without fail for 6 months. The transformation was so profound that people in her life commented that she seemed like a completely different person. She moved through the world with new confidence. She made decisions from abundance rather than from fear. She spoke about money completely differently. She carried herself with a sense of worthiness and prosperity that radiated from her being. And of course, her financial circumstances transformed dramatically to match her new identity. She received promotions she hadn't sought. Investment opportunities appeared. Her income multiplied. But more importantly than the external wealth was the internal transformation. She genuinely no longer identified as a poor person who happened to have some money. She knew herself to be fundamentally wealthy, regardless of external circumstances. Years later, she experienced a financial setback that would have devastated her old poverty-identified self. But from her new wealthy identity, she moved through the challenge with complete confidence and ease, knowing at her core that this was temporary and that her fundamental prosperity was unshakable. And indeed, she recovered quickly and moved to even greater abundance. The identity transformation she had done through sleep practice had created such a solid foundation of wealth consciousness that external circumstances could no longer shake her sense of being prosperous. This is what becomes possible when you use sleep as identity transformation rather than just belief reprogramming. You become unshakable in your prosperity consciousness because it's no longer something you're trying to maintain through effort. It's who you fundamentally are at your core. And from that solid identity foundation, external wealth flows naturally and effortlessly because your outer world can only reflect your inner identity. Now, I want to address something crucial about this work that people often misunderstand. When we talk about transforming into wealthy identity, we're not talking about ego inflation or arrogance or identifying with material possessions. We're talking about recognizing your essential unity with the source of all abundance, knowing yourself to be an expression of infinite supply, understanding that prosperity is your spiritual birthright, not because you're special, but because everyone's true nature is oneness with divine abundance. This is humility at the highest level, recognizing what you truly are rather than pretending to be the limited separate self that lacks and struggles. The ego wants to make prosperity about being better than others, having more than others, proving your worth through material success. But true wealth consciousness is recognizing that you're not separate from the infinite supply that sustains all of creation. You're not trying to get prosperity from outside yourself. You're recognizing and accepting the prosperity that you are at your essential nature. This is why spiritual masters throughout history could be genuinely wealthy in consciousness while living simply in material terms. They knew themselves to be one with infinite abundance regardless of external circumstances. This brings us to another profound dimension of sleep prosperity work that deserves deep exploration. And that's the relationship between forgiveness and financial manifestation. Most people don't realize that unforgiveness, resentment, and bitterness toward anyone, especially around money matters, creates energetic blocks that prevent abundance from flowing freely. If you're holding grudges against people who owe you money, if you're bitter about past financial betrayals, if you resent wealthy people or feel victimized by economic systems, all of that unforgiveness is literally blocking prosperity from reaching you because you're vibrating at the frequency of scarcity and victimhood rather than abundance and empowerment. Sleep provides the perfect opportunity for deep forgiveness work that clears these blocks at the subconscious level. During your waking hours, conscious forgiveness often feels difficult or even impossible when wounds are deep. Your ego resists letting go of the grievance. Your sense of justice demands that wrongs be acknowledged and repaid. But during sleep, when ego dissolves and you access higher consciousness, forgiveness becomes natural and effortless because you're no longer operating from the limited, separate self that feels hurt and wronged. You're operating from universal consciousness that sees the bigger picture and holds compassion for all beings, including yourself. Here's a powerful sleep forgiveness practice that clears financial blocks at the deepest level. As part of your bedtime prosperity ritual, before you drift off to sleep, bring to mind anyone you're holding resentment toward regarding money. Maybe someone who never repaid money they borrowed. Maybe a business partner who cheated you. Maybe a parent who raised you in poverty. Maybe wealthy people you've envied or resented. Maybe yourself for financial mistakes. Bring each person to mind one by one and speak forgiveness over them, genuinely releasing all bitterness and resentment. The words might be something like this: I forgive you completely for all financial wounds between us. I release all bitterness, all resentment, all sense of being wronged. I free you and I free myself. Whatever happened between us regarding money, I let it go now. I bless you and release you. We are both free. Speak these words with genuine intention to let go, not just saying them mechanically, but actually feeling the release in your body and consciousness. Then as you drift off to sleep, hold the intention that your sleeping consciousness completes the forgiveness work at depths your conscious mind cannot access. What happens during the night is profound. Your subconscious mind, in those highly receptive delta wave states, processes and releases the energetic charge around these financial wounds. The resentment that's been blocking your prosperity dissolves at cellular and consciousness levels. You wake in the morning genuinely free from grudges that may have been weighing on you for years. And with those blocks cleared, abundance can flow to you freely because you're no longer holding the vibration of victimhood and scarcity that unforgiveness creates. Let me share a remarkable story that demonstrates the power of sleep forgiveness work for financial manifestation. There was a woman who had been pursuing prosperity consciousness for years with minimal results. She did all the affirmations, all the visualizations, all the bedtime practices we've discussed. But money remained scarce in her life, and she couldn't understand why. Then in working with a spiritual teacher, she uncovered deep resentment she'd been carrying toward her father, who had squandered the family's money when she was a child, leaving them in poverty that shaped her entire early life. She had never consciously forgiven him, still carrying bitterness about those difficult years, still blaming him for her current financial struggles, still holding him responsible for the poverty consciousness she'd inherited. That unforgiveness was like a dam blocking the flow of abundance to her. As long as she held her father as the cause of her lack, she was actually empowering him to continue determining her financial reality. She was giving away her prosperity power to someone who couldn't give it back because the grievance existed in her consciousness, not in external reality. Her teacher guided her to practice sleep forgiveness work, specifically releasing her father and all resentment around the childhood poverty. Every night for 30 days, she would lie in bed and speak forgiveness over her father, genuinely releasing all bitterness, blessing him, and freeing both of them from the energetic prison of unforgiveness. The first week was difficult because the resentment felt justified and letting it go felt like excusing his behavior. But she persisted with the practice, trusting that forgiveness was for her freedom rather than his absolution. Something extraordinary began happening around day 14. She woke one morning with tears streaming down her face, feeling genuine compassion for her father for the first time in decades. She saw him not as the villain of her story, but as a struggling human who had done his best with the consciousness he had. She felt the burden of decades of blame lift from her heart, and she understood that by forgiving him, she was reclaiming her power to create her own prosperity rather than remaining a victim of circumstances from 40 years ago. Within 2 weeks of that breakthrough forgiveness, her financial situation began transforming rapidly. Money came from unexpected sources. Opportunities appeared that had been invisible to her before. Her income tripled within 2 months. Within 6 months, she had more wealth than her father had lost all those years ago, and she understood that the prosperity had always been trying to reach her but couldn't get through the barrier of unforgiveness she'd been holding. The moment she cleared that block through sleep forgiveness work, abundance flooded in naturally. This is why forgiveness must be part of any serious prosperity practice. You cannot hold resentment and receive abundance simultaneously. The frequencies are incompatible. If you're struggling financially, despite doing everything right with affirmations and visualizations, examine whether you're holding unforgiveness toward anyone around money. Then use your sleep time to release it at the deepest level, freeing yourself and freeing the flow of prosperity in your life. Now let me teach you about something that takes sleep prosperity work to an even higher level. And that's the practice of sleeping with specific prosperity intentions rather than just general abundance programming. Most people approach bedtime affirmations with vague desires like, I want more money, or I want to be wealthy. But spiritual law responds more powerfully to specific focused intention. When you give your subconscious mind a clear, specific prosperity goal to work on during sleep, it can mobilize resources, attract opportunities, and create solutions with laser focus rather than diffuse effort. Here's how to practice sleeping with specific prosperity intention. Identify one clear financial goal you want to manifest. Maybe it's a specific amount of money you need for something important. Maybe it's a particular income level you want to reach. Maybe it's a specific business opportunity you want to attract. Maybe it's resolution of a particular debt or financial challenge. Choose one goal to focus on rather than trying to manifest everything at once. Clarity and focus create power in manifestation. Then create a specific bedtime intention statement around that goal. Instead of generic, I am prosperous, craft something like, $10,000 comes to me easily by the end of this month for my specific need. Or, the perfect business partnership appears that doubles my income. Or, complete debt freedom manifests now through unexpected blessings. Make the intention specific, clear, present tense, and emotionally compelling. Write it down if that helps you clarify it. As you lie down to sleep, speak this specific intention out loud or silently 3 times with full focus and feeling. Then say something like, Divine Intelligence, I give this intention to you now. Work through my sleeping consciousness tonight to manifest this goal or something even better for my highest good. Show me in dreams, send me guidance, attract the perfect opportunities, do whatever is needed to bring this into reality. I trust you completely. Then release the intention entirely, letting go of all effort and control, and drift off to sleep, knowing that infinite intelligence is working on your behalf through the night. What happens when you sleep with specific intention is that your subconscious mind, which has access to resources and connections your conscious mind doesn't even know exist, goes to work creating pathways to manifestation. You might wake with clear guidance about actions to take. You might have dreams showing you solutions. You might find yourself led to exactly the right people or opportunities. Or the universe might deliver the manifestation through channels you never could have predicted consciously. But by giving your sleeping consciousness a clear, focused mission, you harness its creative power with precision rather than dispersing it across vague, general desires. A man learned this practice and decided to try it with a specific, challenging goal. He needed $20,000 within 60 days for a crucial business opportunity that could transform his career. He didn't have the money and couldn't see any logical way to manifest that amount in such a short time frame through his current circumstances. But he committed to sleeping with that specific intention every night for 60 days, trusting divine intelligence to create a pathway even though he couldn't see how. Every night he would speak his specific intention, $20,000 or more comes to me easily and joyfully within 60 days for this perfect business opportunity. Then he would release it to infinite intelligence and fall asleep trusting the process. For the first 3 weeks, nothing visible happened, and he was tempted to doubt. But he maintained faith and continued the practice faithfully. Then, in week 4, things began moving in unexpected ways. An old client contacted him about a project he'd forgotten about that paid $5,000. A relative mentioned an investment opportunity that felt perfect and yielded $4,000 quickly. He received an unexpected tax refund of $3,000. Each blessing brought him closer to his goal through channels he never could have predicted or orchestrated consciously. And on day 57, 3 days before his deadline, he received a phone call offering him consulting work that paid the final $8,000 he needed, bringing him to his goal with time to spare. He understood that by sleeping with that specific, focused intention, night after night, he had programmed his subconscious to attract and recognize opportunities leading to that goal. Divine intelligence working through his sleeping consciousness had orchestrated circumstances, people, and timing to deliver exactly what he'd requested. And the process had built his faith in such a powerful way that he continued using specific sleep intentions for every important goal, experiencing consistent miraculous results. This is available to you right now. Instead of sleeping with vague hopes for general prosperity, choose one specific financial goal that matters to you. Create a clear intention statement around it. Give it to divine intelligence every night before sleep. Then release control and trust the process, staying alert during waking hours for guidance and opportunities while allowing your sleeping consciousness to do the heavy lifting of manifestation work. This focused approach produces results far more quickly and powerfully than scattered, unfocused prosperity affirmations. Now I want to explore another dimension of sleep prosperity work that's rarely discussed but extraordinarily powerful. And that's the practice of what can be called prosperity dreaming or wealth rehearsal during sleep. We've talked about receiving guidance through dreams and about programming your subconscious before sleep. But there's an advanced practice where you actually use dream time to rehearse and practice living as your wealthy self, creating neural pathways and consciousness patterns through dream experience that then manifest in physical reality. The way this works connects to something fascinating that neuroscience has discovered. Your brain cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experience and actual physical experience when it comes to forming neural pathways and memory patterns. When you vividly imagine or dream about doing something, your brain creates the same neural connections as if you'd actually done it physically. Athletes use this principle when they mentally rehearse perfect performance. Musicians use it when they practice pieces in their imagination, and you can use it to literally practice being wealthy during your dream time. Building prosperity consciousness through dream experience. Here's the practice for prosperity dreaming. As you're preparing for sleep, after your prosperity decrees and intentions, add one more element. Set the intention that you will dream of being wealthy, that your dreams tonight will be rehearsals of your prosperous life, that your sleeping consciousness will practice living in abundance. You might say something like, "Tonight, I dream of wealth. My dreams are practice sessions for prosperity. I experience myself as abundantly successful in my dream life. I wake having rehearsed my wealthy reality." Then, as you drift off, hold images in your mind of scenarios you want to dream about. See yourself in your dream checking a large bank balance. Imagine yourself in the dream making a major purchase without concern. Picture yourself in dream reality, giving generously and living abundantly. You're essentially programming your dream content to serve as prosperity practice rather than just random unconscious processing. And because your brain treats dream experience as real when forming neural pathways, each night of prosperity dreaming literally builds the consciousness and neural structures of a wealthy person. A woman learned this practice and committed to it faithfully for 90 days. She would set the intention each night to dream of being wealthy, then fall asleep visualizing herself living abundantly in her dreams. At first, her dreams remained scattered, and she didn't remember much prosperity content. But she persisted with the practice, trusting the process. Somewhere around week 3, she started having vivid dreams of herself as a successful business owner, making confident decisions, handling large sums of money easily, living in beautiful environments. These prosperity dreams became more frequent and more vivid as she continued the practice, and she noticed something remarkable. The confidence and ease she felt handling money in her dreams began translating to her waking life. She found herself making financial decisions with new certainty. She spoke about money differently. She carried herself with the energy of someone who was comfortable with wealth. Her entire nervous system was being trained through dream rehearsal to operate as a prosperous person rather than someone struggling with lack. By day 90, her external circumstances had transformed to match her new internal programming. Her business had grown dramatically. Her income had multiplied. Opportunities appeared that perfectly matched the success she'd been rehearsing in her dreams. She understood that by literally practicing being wealthy in her dream life night after night, she had built such solid prosperity consciousness that manifesting external wealth became almost automatic. Her brain and subconscious genuinely believed she was wealthy because she'd experienced it so consistently in dreams. This practice of prosperity dreaming might sound strange to rational minds, but it's based on solid principles of how consciousness and neural pathways work. Every night you dream is an opportunity to practice your desired reality, building the consciousness patterns that then create that reality in physical form. Don't waste your dreams on unconscious processing of fear and limitation. Use them deliberately as rehearsal time for the prosperous life you're claiming. Set the intention before sleep, program the dream content, and wake having practiced being your wealthy self. Now we need to talk about something crucial that determines whether all these sleep prosperity practices actually produce lasting transformation or just temporary results that fade over time. That something is consistency and what can be called prosperity momentum. Many people start these practices with great enthusiasm, experience some positive results, and then gradually let the practices slip away as life gets busy or as initial enthusiasm wanes. Then they wonder why their prosperity breakthrough didn't last or why results stopped coming. The truth is that consciousness work requires consistent maintenance to create permanent transformation. You wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to be fit for life. You wouldn't eat healthy for a week and expect permanent wellness. Physical fitness requires consistent, ongoing practice. Consciousness transformation works the same way. The prosperity programming you install through sleep practice must be maintained and reinforced consistently, or old poverty patterns gradually reassert themselves and recreate scarcity circumstances. This doesn't mean you're trapped in endless effort with no destination. What happens with consistent practice is that you build what can be called prosperity momentum, where each night's practice builds on previous nights, creating cumulative power that eventually reaches a tipping point where wealth consciousness becomes your new default operating system rather than something you have to maintain through conscious effort. But reaching that tipping point requires consistency over time, usually at least 6 months to a year of faithful daily practice. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, speaking the new language requires intense conscious effort and constant practice. You have to think about every word, consciously translate, deliberately construct sentences. But if you practice consistently every day, eventually the new language becomes automatic. You start thinking in it, dreaming in it, speaking it fluently without conscious effort. It becomes your new default. Prosperity consciousness works exactly the same way. At first, maintaining abundance mindset requires conscious daily practice through your sleep rituals. But with consistent practice over time, prosperity consciousness becomes your new default, operating automatically without constant maintenance. The key to building this momentum is making your sleep prosperity practice absolutely non-negotiable no matter what. Busy day, exhausted, traveling, sick, doesn't matter. You speak your prosperity decrees before sleep. You set your intentions. You practice your identity transformation. You do at least the minimum version every single night, without exception, for as long as it takes to reach the tipping point where wealth consciousness becomes automatic. This level of commitment is what separates people who experience temporary improvements from people who experience permanent transformation. Let me share a final story that brings together everything we've explored in these hours together and demonstrates the ultimate possibility of this work. There was a woman who had struggled with poverty her entire life, raised in lack, educated in scarcity, surrounded by poverty consciousness from childhood. She had tried many approaches to improving her finances over the years with minimal success. Then she discovered these teachings about using sleep as the primary prosperity tool and decided to commit to them completely for 1 full year without any evaluation or judgment. Every single night for 365 days straight, she practiced everything we've discussed. Prosperity decrees before sleep, wealth lullabies as she drifted off, gratitude practice for current blessings, specific intentions for goals, identity transformation, releasing poverty self and claiming wealthy self, forgiveness, work clearing all financial resentments, prosperity dreaming, rehearsing abundant life, divine transmission, requesting perfect programming, morning practices, reconnecting with prosperity consciousness upon waking. She made this her spiritual practice, her sacred ritual, her most important daily commitment. The first 3 months were difficult because external circumstances didn't change much and her faith wavered. But she had committed to the full year, so she persisted. Months 4 through 6 brought subtle shifts, small improvements, hints that something was changing beneath the surface. Months 7 through 9 produced more obvious results. Opportunities appearing, income increasing, debts resolving. And months 10 through 12 were explosive. Transformation so rapid and complete that it seemed miraculous to people who didn't understand the consciousness work that had been building momentum all year. By the end of that year, her life was completely unrecognizable from where she'd started. Her income had increased tenfold. She'd manifested a thriving business that allowed her to work from home, doing what she loved. She'd paid off debts that had burdened her for decades. She'd bought a house, something she'd believed impossible. She had healthy savings for the first time in her life. But more than all the external wealth was the internal transformation. She genuinely knew herself to be a prosperous being rather than someone trying to become prosperous. Wealth consciousness had become her default operating system. And here's what matters most about her story. 5 years later, her prosperity continues to grow naturally, without the intense practice that created the initial breakthrough. She still maintains basic bedtime prosperity practices, but abundance now flows to her automatically because the consciousness foundation is so solid. She's reached the tipping point where wealth consciousness operates on autopilot rather than requiring constant maintenance. This is what becomes possible when you commit fully to using sleep as your prosperity transformation tool consistently over time until momentum carries you to permanent breakthrough. Before we complete this journey together, I want you to take a moment right now to make a sacred commitment to yourself and to the divine intelligence that's been guiding you to these teachings. If you felt resonance with what you've heard tonight, if something inside you recognizes truth in these principles, if you're ready to finally experience the prosperity that is your birthright, then commit right now to implementing these practices faithfully. Not just trying them casually when you remember. not just doing them occasionally when you feel motivated, but making them your non-negotiable daily spiritual practice for at least 1 full year. Speak this commitment out loud, even if you're in a public place and must whisper. I commit to sacred sleep prosperity practice for 1 full year starting tonight. Every night I program abundance consciousness. Every morning I wake to prosperity. I trust divine intelligence working through my sleeping mind. I maintain consistency regardless of circumstances. I allow prosperity momentum to build until wealth consciousness becomes my permanent reality. I accept divine supply as my birthright, and I claim it now through faithful practice. So be it. Speaking that commitment creates an energetic contract with yourself and with the universe. It sets intention in motion at the deepest level, and it gives your subconscious clear instructions about what you're committed to creating over this next year. Don't underestimate the power of speaking commitment out loud. Something shifts in consciousness when you make verbal declaration of your intention that doesn't happen with silent wishes or vague hopes. Now, as we come to the close of these teachings, I want to address you directly with something important. If what you've discovered here tonight has opened something within you, if you feel that deep resonance that says, yes, this is the path to the prosperity I've been seeking, then I'd be honored to have you as part of this community we're building around these ancient wisdom teachings. A simple like on this video helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. And if you feel moved to do so, write in the comments, I am prosperity itself. Speak it as declaration of your new identity, claiming your wealthy self publicly, making your commitment visible. This public declaration has power because it makes your intention real, not just internally, but externally. Everything you've heard tonight is based on spiritual law that has operated throughout human history and that will continue operating whether you believe in it or not. But belief and faith accelerate manifestation tremendously. Doubt and skepticism create resistance that slows the process. So I invite you to suspend skepticism for 1 year. Give these practices your full faith and commitment for 12 months. What do you have to lose except the poverty consciousness that's been creating lack in your life? And what do you have to gain except the abundant life you've always desired? Tonight when you lie down to sleep, everything changes. You're no longer just going to bed to rest your body. You're entering your prosperity portal, your nightly appointment with infinite abundance, your sacred time for consciousness transformation. The practices you've learned tonight are tools that have created prosperity for countless people over generations. They work. They're reliable. They're based on law rather than luck, but they require your faithful application. Knowledge alone changes nothing. Applied knowledge through consistent practice changes everything. As you drift off to sleep tonight and every night forward, know that you're not alone in this practice. There's an invisible community of consciousness practitioners around the world using these same principles to manifest prosperity. You're tapping into a collective field of abundance consciousness that amplifies your individual practice. And most importantly, you're connecting with divine intelligence that has infinite resources, unlimited creativity, and perfect timing for manifesting your good in ways beyond anything your human mind could orchestrate. Sleep well tonight, dear soul. Sleep as the wealthy being you truly are. Dream of abundance, wake to prosperity, and trust that with consistent practice over time, your entire life will transform to reflect the consciousness you're building during these sacred hours of rest. The prosperity you seek is already seeking you. Your only job is to become the consciousness match for it through faithful sleep practice until your outer world has no choice but to reorganize itself around your inner wealth. May your sleep tonight and every night forward be blessed with divine transmission of perfect prosperity consciousness. May you wake each morning more aligned with abundance than the day before. May your dreams be rehearsals for your wealthy life. May every dollar you touch multiply in your hands. May divine supply flow to you from expected and unexpected sources. May you know yourself as the prosperous being you truly are. And may the year ahead bring you transformation so complete that when you look back 12 months from now, you'll barely recognize the person you were tonight. This is not the end, but the beginning of your prosperity journey through sacred sleep practice. Everything starts now, tonight, with your first conscious bedtime prosperity ritual. Be faithful to the practice, trust the process, maintain consistency, build momentum, and watch as divine intelligence works miracles through your sleeping consciousness, creating wealth in your life that surpasses anything you've imagined possible. The portal is open. The path is clear. Your wealthy self awaits. Step through tonight and never look back. Sleep in prosperity. Wake in abundance. Live in wealth. This is your divine right. This is spiritual law. This is your new reality starting now. So be it and so it is.